بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. It is a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to join with you again on this Tuesday night to gather to have another edition of our favorite Tuesday night activity, Black Imams Roundtable. And I am especially honored to be joined by my beloved companion, colleague, Imam Faheem, the Imam of the Boomba, Camden's finest. And I am your brother, Amin Muhammad. And we are missing our beloved and esteemed genius, Imam Naim Abdullah, who is on travel leave for right now. May Allah reward him and increase him. And inshallah, he'll be joining us again soon. But first things first, after welcoming you, let me remind all of you to share. It is extremely important that each and every one of us share this session. It takes a few seconds. Make the good intention. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. That the deeds, they are by the intention, and every person will get what they intended. So, inshallah tabarak wa ta'ala, all of us can intend to spread knowledge. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, الدال على الخير كفاعله, that the one who indicates to goodness will get the reward of everyone who does it after them. So every time we share, and there is always a benefit, conveying even a little bit, one line, one word that guides someone to the truth is a benefit for us. As the Prophet ﷺ said, بَلِّغُ عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Convey for me, even if it's one saying, one thing. And if we learn one thing and we act according to it, those who convey that to us, that one thing, would get a great reward. Imam al-Haddad, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Haddad al-Qulub, he said, "Man alima mas'alatan wahidatan fahuwa alimun biha." That whoever knows one religious judgment, one religious case, fahuwa alimun biha, then that person is learned in that, and he must convey it. And we can remember that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned what means the one who carries understanding may carry it to someone who is more understanding and knowledgeable about those issues than the one who brought it. And he's going to get the reward. So spread, there's always some benefit. Even the fact that we mentioned when I started, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, that's a benefit. You know, a benefit, let me give you a benefit about that. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the hadith, كل أمر ذي بال لا يبدأ فيه ببسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فهو أخطأ أو ببسم الله فهو أخطأ. Every religiously valued matter that does not begin with the Basmalah, the name of Allah, it will be cut off, meaning it will lose barakah, qalilul barakah. It will only have a little bit of blessing. So just conveying the Basmalah and sharing that, right, is a protection. Some of the ulama al-arifun, those knowers of Allah, those scholars who are knowers of Allah, they said that Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim has 19 letters. And each letter is a protection for the angels that are in charge of torturing people in the hellfire. Because over the hellfire are 19 angels, and each letter is a protection. Subhanallah is a benefit, right? There is a benefit. And we mention the kalima of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam often. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam told us about La ilaha illallah, أفضل ما قلت أنا والنبيون من قبلي لا إله إلا الله. The best thing that I and the prophets before me have said is La ilaha illallah. MashaAllah. No one deserves to be worshipped except Allah. Right? So these are all fawaid. These are all benefits that will happen just on the Black Imams Roundtable. Besides other issues, we conveying something from the Quran, something from the Hadith, something from the ulama, just mentioning those scholars in the Dhikr Salihin, Tatanazzalu Rahamat, when the pious are mentioned, there is a constant downpouring of Allah's mercies. We mention pious people all the time, you know? So there is so much, so many benefits besides the subject that we talk about. Inside the subject are so many Jews for the wise person, you know? So may Allah make us, you know, wise people and benefit and spread. So spread and share. The other thing that we should not forget, and it's extremely important, and really, for me, it's always discomfort for me when I talk about this subject, but it is extremely important that we talk about it. Supporting the work that we're doing. We're doing valuable work. We've been on the road in different states for the last 3 weeks, weekend after weekend, gathering around the country, benefiting our people. And what facilitates us doing all that work is the support that you give us, that informs people about what we're doing, that facilitates sometimes to do the things we do. And everywhere we go, there is somebody showing great appreciation for the work of the Black Imams Roundtable. I've never went anywhere where somebody comes up, several people that I never met, never heard of, never saw them online, and they say, thank you for the work y'all doing on the Black Imams Roundtable. I listen to y'all all the time. I never even saw the person, never saw their name. They just in the back listening every week, following, benefiting, learning. So the way we continue that is through your support. So don't be shy. The link is there. The more you support our efforts, the more we're able to do. So share. Don't forget to support and encourage others to support. it helps. We have a lot of work to do. And after tonight's discussion, you'll see how important it is for us to do our part. Everyone has a part. Everyone has a role to play in conveying this prophetic legacy of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So today's subject is related to some upcoming programs that we're going to have that I think are very important. And I'm not letting the cat out the bag, as they say, because I don't want nobody to hijack our idea. So I'm going to keep it under the hat. Maybe, what's today's date? Maybe next week or the week after, we're going to have a whole new series of lectures on specific subjects. But that'll be maybe next week or maybe the week after next. I don't know when we're going to begin. But tonight's topic, I think, is a solution-based topic. And it's a discussion that I think most of us, I know all of us as imams, myself and Imam Faheem and Imam Naeem, we've all had to deal with this issue. And it is a challenge. So what is the topic? It is, let me copy this. So tonight's topic is a seeker's dilemma, sincere or sincerely mistaken. That is a mistake. So let's fix that. It should be, let me put it again. This is what it should say. That's what it should say. Okay. A seeker's dilemma, sincere but sincerely mistaken. That's what it should say. So that should be the title. Blame it on us being tired and overworked. But this is an important subject that I want to talk about. And I think it relates to many of us, even though what initiated the idea is something specific. But we're not going to talk about that specific thing. I don't think it's really relevant till we can have the full discussion. But many of us, let me start by asking a question. How many of us, right? And this is an honesty, speaking the truth. All right, I'm a slow typer.
I'm about to say, you're making them keys sound like you're really doing something. You know what I mean?
All right, that's a question, right? You could just say I. How many of us have felt the pain of being mistaken in our religious understanding? That's a question. I want to engage us in that. So what is meant? Yeah, it's painful. Hydra Stacy, is painful to be mistaken. And I use mistaken as a soft word. I'm working on my word choice of words because sometimes I speak and it causes pain just saying it the way I say stuff, So I'm trying to work on a more palatable way of speaking. Sometimes my hood come out and I just say it. And all the time you shouldn't just say it, right? So mistaken because you actually don't have what you believe to be true. The situation is on the opposite side of the coin. You wrong. So mistaken. And sometimes you may have had that mistaken religious understanding for years. And you may have really thought you was upon the truth and the right way. And then some information, some events occur, and you discover I was mistaken. I was mistaken. Or you could say I was wrong, I was incorrect, I was bamboozled, hoodwinked, run amok, all that you can use, but in a softest way to say it, you were mistaken, right? And sometimes that comes with a level of hurt and confusion and frustration. Because what many people don't like is to have to start over. That's hard for many, not for every single person, but for many people to admit I was mistaken and then have to start all over again, depending on the degree and the severity of your misunderstanding. That's not easy. That is not an easy thing to do, right? And especially for older people and ambitious people. Imam, I don't even sound like myself with these new words, right? Ambitious people meaning, those people who really, really thought they was right. And they were so right that they became proponents of their idea of right and forthright with it, right? Out front. And then that person discovers that they were mistaken. They got to dial all that stuff they done back, right? I'll tell you a personal story. As I don't hide, I grew up in the Ansar Allah community when it was Ansar Allah community. And under Dr. York, at that time, in those days, in the 80s, he was called Sayyid al-Imam Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi. Yeah, boy, I still remember. Right? And I'm telling you, my relationship with him was so strong in terms of attachment. He gave me my first garb. He gave me just so much esteem to be a black man and the feeling and, I just, man, I could really, 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 really inspired me. And I'll tell you the whole story just to give you a case in point. So the discussion I'm having is not restricted to what I'm talking about today. The concept, I think all of us or many of us have experienced it. So, so I left my family. I remember saying to my mother and my brothers and my sisters, my mother and sisters and brothers are those who believe that I believe. Y'all not my family. My family's in the mosque, the 144,000. Right? And then I'm talking about I'm a teenager, though. I'm a young kid talking like that. White man's education, you know what I mean? I was wilding. What they call it now, crashing out, right? I was crashing out big time. And so I moved to the mosque in Brooklyn. And when I get there, I'm like, it was nothing like we was reading in books. Right? Like all them flowery speeches and the books and all that. That stuff went right out the window. And now you there and you looking and you got to make sense of a lie. You know, all this for buy and we just, and you get to see like, oh man, this is fake, right? But you done left your family, you done cursed everybody out, not with cuss words, but you know, you've been badgering people, calling the white man the devil and just everything. And you get here and you say, this is a scam. Right? This is a scam. And you can see it, it's obvious. Like, I was young, but I wasn't stupid. This is a scam, right? But you there, you in it. And now you got to stand on all that stuff you've been selling. You just didn't know that this was going on. So, you know, we do it. And I remember my first couple weeks of peddling, right? So what we used to have to do is in the Ansar community, every day the men, they would have to go out and earn $100 a day. Now I'm talking about in the 80s. I'm not talking about these new guys that like, this is in the 80s, right? You know, like now everybody's like, no, this was in the 80s I'm talking about. You got to go out and earn $100 every single day to give to the community. So every day you giving this man $100 a day, right? And you selling, they had products, you know, incense, oils, books, flags, all kinds of stuff that nobody would never buy anyway. So basically, your money was earned by coming up with fancy ways to get people to donate, right? To feel sorry for you almost, to buy stuff they didn't want. But as a young guy, it was easier for me because I'm young. So in that time, black consciousness, people love to see a black young teenager in all white, talking that stuff, reading the Bible, got the Quran, mixing all up, got a little Arabic, you know, that was fascinating. And when people had the black conscious movement, you know, it was very fascinating for people. So it was easy to get money, but still $100 was hard to get. And then you're going to give that whole $100 away. None of that's for you. That's what you're giving. So sometimes people didn't make the money, right? Especially if you did it the honest way. Now, the honest way, which was the lie they told you when they gave you the stuff, you only sell this, right? So they had their own incense, their own oils, their own books, right? Pamphlets a piece, that's what they called them. Nobody buying that stuff. So the older people, they got regular oils that you buy, Egyptian musk, blue Nile, you know, Somali rose, frankincense and myrrh, you know, all the stuff y'all buy, right? In the mosque, that was considered kaffir oil. That was the original takfiris now that I think about it, right? If you didn't live in the Ansar community, you was considered a kaffir, right? So everything that wasn't from the Ansars was kaffir stuff. Kaffir incense, kaffir oils, right? Oh my goodness. Wow, that was a wild life. But anyway, so you wouldn't sell none of that stuff if you was a real Ansar. You'd go hard and selling no kaffir oils. You know what I'm saying? But people only buying kaffir oils if they're going to buy oil. They ain't buying that stuff you got. Lotus, some other crap he done made up. The stuff stink. All of it. You can't sell it. And I remember me and my partners, because we used to go out in partners. That's another story, right? We young boys, we don't know. We were trying to follow the rules, right? And so a couple times I didn't make my money, right? And they used to, every Friday, you would come to the Hall of Knowledge on Hart Street. That's where we used to have like classes and stuff, Sunday classes. for the Kafirs that come in to join the community. It feels so funny saying that because now I'm going back in my my database and pulling up the receipts, and I'm like, dang, they was calling people Kafir left and right, right? It's like, and we were the biggest kuffar available, right? Right. Um, so every Friday before Jumu'ah, like around 11 o'clock, they would have a family meeting. So everybody would come, the men. So all the men would come to the Hall of Knowledge, right? And they would divide the room. Like everybody be on one side of the room. And then they would say, whoever, they would call out who didn't make their quota. So which would have been $700 that week, right? You're supposed to make 100 a day, but basically $700. So whoever didn't make it, they would put them on one side of the room. They would divide the room. Who made it stay on this side, who didn't make it, or vice versa. I don't remember what side it would be on. That's irrelevant anyway. But they would divide the room into like two portions. The ones who made the money, they're the quota makers, and the other ones are bums. Now they would do that, and you would be on video. The women would be looking at you. Sometimes those who were married, their wives, they would be watching, and he would be in his office somewhere in the studio talking junk, right, from a speaker, right? And it was just wild, right? And I remember how men would be so humiliated. Like, you're a grown man and you really out there trying. Some of them, there were some bums, but very few. Most were people who was really trying. It's just hard in the 80s to make $100 a day without doing nothing wrong, like just following the rules. Very difficult. So some couldn't do it. And they would get trashed, right? And I remember one time I was in the bum group, and I was young, I'm a teenager. So I start crying because I was really trying. And it was like, to me, I'm letting down Abu down, and I'm letting I'm letting down the 144,000. I'm just deluded, right? And I actually cried. And trying to say I really worked, and I knew I was getting ready to snitch. But I'm from the hood, so I didn't snitch, but it was right on the tip of my tongue because I knew what people were doing. They were setting up tables, they were selling kaffir oils, they was doing all the stuff. Negroes had girlfriends with a good job, right? They were doing all kinds of crap. So I knew this, but you ain't gonna tell. We just gonna take your medicine because we soldiers. I wasn't supposed to go here, Imam Faheem, but it fits just what I'm talking about. Now, put the person and the people we were talking about earlier, they going through the same thing, just different. The same feeling I'm talking about, that's what they going through. So I remember, so after that moment, one of the singers for the Force MDs, he was in the mosque. You know the Force MDs, right? Tears, uh, Tender Love,
Yeah. Them
you
dollar
got
house party, them dollar basement house party classics.
Yeah. So one of them was in the mosque. So he came up to me. He was, because they was doing all kinds of crap. They singing. I know all this stuff. They got music going on, and it was a mess. He came up to me. He was like, "Come on, young buck, I'm gonna show you the ropes," right? And he took me, and he let me hang out with him. This guy was selling gold. They had tables. They were doing all kinds of rule breaking, right? And I'm looking like stuck for the law. And he says to me, "Listen, man, you want to make your money? They don't care about all that stuff you talking. They patting you on your head. As soon as you don't make your money and you get old enough, they're gonna beat your lights out, right?" So, you know, he showed me the ropes. Now I'm watching all this stuff, and I'm still trying to maintain this lie that I know is a lie, right? Very hard. And I'm a teenager, so imagine the adults, like the adult people who really left homes, left careers, left jobs. Like, imagine how they were feeling. This is a teenager, just me, no kids, no wife, no nothing, just a young boy, right? Imagine people who really had a life, how they felt. And I'm telling it like this, just the point of being sincerely mistaken, because you couldn't tell me we wasn't on the truth. And so we going through this, and we learning. And remember we was coming through the Lincoln Tunnel, and I told you the story about me and my man with the cars, and we was hiding from each other because you wasn't allowed to have a car at the Lincoln Tunnel. All that stuff was going on, right? Every time I go to New York, I get all these flashbacks because that was my youth around the city, and Bronx and Brooklyn and Jamaica, Queens, and Manhattan, 42nd, when 42nd was 42nd. See, the people who go to New York now, 42nd ain't like it. 42nd was like 42nd was wild back in the day, right? Just wild, wild. And we used to be on 42nd. That's where you make your money. If it get late, soon as it get dark, hit 42nd. You can get your money, whatever's missing, because there's all kinds of crap going on down there. But anyway, I ain't mean to reminisce, right? But so one day, I'm coming back from pedaling. I never forget this day. It's firmly established in my memory bank. I probably will never forget it because it was a day that changed my life. I'm coming back late at night, me and my partner, because we used to have to go in partners. That's a whole nother story about why we used to go in twos in partners. But me and my partner coming back, we're coming from Broadway off the J train, and then we're coming up towards Bushwick Avenue on Hart Street. And we get to Bushwick, towards Bushwick and Hart, on the corner, we see a van open. And we see his two bodyguards who we recognize because everybody hated their guts, right? There were two bodyguards. I'm saving names because one of them is now Sunni, Ahl Sunnah, and nobody want their name all on the internet. So I'm gonna leave out the names. But anyone who was an Ansar in New York in the 80s know who the two main security people were for him, because we all hated their guts, right? So they were like on one side of the door, and the van was open, one side. And I see Imam Isa for me. That's As-Sayyid al-Imam al-Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, right? So you got a kid, he's it, he's the man, right? And I had never saw him in regular clothes, all the time garbs, turban. That's my picture of him, right? And he's in the back of a van, like on the back of the van is open, and he's kissing this woman, right? But he's in regular clothes. The Dr. York, that's how I found about the Dr. York stuff. This was my introduction to Dr. York. And he's kissing, and my partner, because we're across the street, right? And they on the other side of the street at the corner. So as you get closer, you can't really see. My partner, he sees him first. He's like, yo, that's Abu. And I never forget this, because that's what we used to call him, Abu, like father. Right? He said, that's Abu. And I was getting ready to punch him. This is my right-hand man. Like my partner, we together all the time. He was from my city. We went in the mosque together, I was getting ready to clock him for Imam. He's like, Abu is kissing some Kafir woman. I was like, ultimate slander. I was going to hit him. He said, man, don't get mad at me. Look, right? And as I get closer, I see it's him. And I was devastated. That was the longest night probably of my life. I was like, oh, what I'm gonna do with this? I could not make any sense of it at all. Now picture this. I had been doing this since I was like 10, 11 years old. So at that time, I'm 17, 18, somewhere around there. Imagine that feeling. I'm like, my whole life just crashed. I never will forget that moment, right? And as I get close, I'm looking, and I'm just sinking and sinking and sinking. The closer I get, and he getting his man, right? I'm like, oh, this is really crap. Now I remember I got all this other stuff that I already know is going on. Didn't see that? I remember going back into my building. I was just, and the oldest, so they loved me because I was a young boy, and the old heads, they liked me a lot. And they're like, oh man, you're giving me Bible verses, the lamb coming from the thief of the night in the dark. Man, I don't want to hear that crap. Right? Like, I ain't want to hear none of that. And subhanAllah, man, they was trying to give me everything to not leave. And I was like, man, this is crap. And I stayed for a little while, and then some other things happened. Like seeing people get beat up and stuff. You know what I mean? Good dudes getting whooped for missing quota, and you messing with careful women, and it couldn't fly. It was just over. But I remember when I left, me and my partner, he got killed when we got out in the streets. He got killed. He got murdered. We left together. I remember that day, man. I was like devastated because I don't know what to do now. Like your whole life over in our mind, because you're not going to be in 144,000. That's all crap. Now you got to go back home and explain to everybody. Like it was just devastating. But I was a young guy. I was a teenager. So teenagers, get back, and it led me to the streets, right? Imagine that as an adult and actually thinking you're upon the sunnah. That same kind of feeling, but now you actually think you're upon the sunnah, and you got to discover this is all nonsense. Cap. And you can identify it. But you've been the leader of that. You've been in the front lines of that for 20, 30 years. You know what I mean? Like think about that. That's what some of our brothers and sisters in Islam are dealing with right now with these new movements, right? And they're trying to figure it out. While at the same time, because these are adults, kids, you're just gonna bounce, do something else, right? It has an impact, but you're young, but we talking about adults with family and kids and children. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a devastating thing. See, here they coming out. All right, this is a session of me too, me too. This is a different type of me too, huh? But so this kind of context I'm describing to you is the same thing Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz felt, right? That same experience with Elijah Muhammad. And sometimes now people are feeling it, maybe not to that point, but theologically, by way of doctrine, they're feeling that, right? So I was thinking about this title, and I was saying to myself, we have a responsibility of helping each other navigate through these storms that happen when you are sincerely mistaken. It's not an easy thing to admit. And like I tell people all the time, me and Imam Muawiyah was talking, and Ibn Ali, no, we was talking about this weekend. And I said, yo, man, even still today, when we start talking and somebody start talking about the Ansars, I feel a sometime in me, a thing in me that says defend, right? Like, so I feel it, honestly, because some of them traces take a long time to get past the feeling, because not everything is bad. Some things is like, yes, that was, and then sometimes it's right. That's why I say don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because not everything. Some people in the nation, they still have that feeling of when we was a group, we was a family. You know, we used to watch each other's back. So, and that's missing. So that thing about that experience sticks with them when they don't have it in this, right? You know what I mean? So you have all these levels, and this, I'm going to flush it out. The wise person will understand what we're getting at. I started with myself to make you understand we're not talking about an individual, we're talking about a reality, right? Does everyone understand that? Because when we bring it up to present day time, that same concept, it gets personal then, because it's someone's living it right now. This is in my past, so I got past it. But the one who's living it right now, you got to be very delicate how you address that person, because they're going through that same thing. You know what I mean? And listen, think about, someone brought up Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahimahullah. People don't realize up to his death, he was still trying to negotiate how he could get back in the nation. People forget that part. Up to his death, he was still trying to figure out how can he fix this. Up to his death. And had he had an inroad, he would have done it. But it had just got so far out of hand, and the Elijah Muhammad didn't do what he believed, meaning Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, believed that all you got to do is just snap your finger, this stuff is over, right? So he was still wrestling with that. And many of us are still wrestling with the same thing. We just ain't identify what we're going through. Many, especially in the Black community. So that's my opening. It was a long opening, 40 minutes. Wow. See that Ansar pain, boy. I'm telling you, man, make you. That's what the guy in NA or AA, you know, they say I'm in recovery. I'm like, dang, you been that high in 30 years. Yeah, it only take one moment, bro. I'm still in recovery, right? 30 years, I'm still in recovery. So I guess when we go through these misunderstandings in our religious persuasions and ideas and theology and practice, we in recovery to Yom Kippur sometimes, right? All right, that's my opening, Imam. Go ahead.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. So alhamdulillah, we thank Imam Amin for that very inspirational and therapeutic opening, mashallah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us all in recovery during our time on this earth, because many of us, we've been through some very traumatizing moments, and it's very difficult to get over some of these things. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his aid. I mean, and so, yeah, continue to share this, continue to, put us in that algorithm, and also be sure to donate, inshallah. We're almost an hour in, and perhaps, we should be at our goal or close to it, inshallah. We request that everyone to send $10, a suggested donation. 50 people, the $10, it helps cover it. We usually get 50 more people between both platforms that we're on, and then people review this later. So it's nothing but, a push of a button or push of a cell phone thing, and, help us to reach that goal, inshallah ta'ala. And yeah, so in discussing this topic, A Seeker's Dilemma, Sincere or Sincerely Mistaken. This is a very provocative topic because, many people, for the most part, they are sincere in what they're doing, even if it's something that's wrong or even something criminal. Just think about many of us who come from certain backgrounds in the streets, and we were totally dedicated. We were totally sincere about what we were doing. We was in it. We was, today they call it ride or die. Back then we call it, down and brown. Down by law. Whatever. And so like if you were in the mix with somebody, you went all the way to the end. There was no two ways about it. If you end, you end. You know what I mean? And there's no way out until it's over. And so and then one of the things that's very interesting that when you come to the Deen, most of us, uh, you know, we are converts to Islam, or reverts, whatever term you want to use. And in that transition, that conversion, we reach this level of sincerity or seeking, trying to change our lives. Many of us, we came to some type of conclusion, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala place something in our lives that we realize that this I gotta find a way out. And many of us we're seeking. We came from church backgrounds or different religious backgrounds, or not even believing in God at all, or believing in something else, or and then there's a moment that occurred that we be like, man, I got to change my life around. I'm seeking something, and in that seeking, many times I know in my experience, I always was appealing to Muslims appealed to me because they seemed real. They had remarkable behavior. They had they always looked presentable. They smelled good. They were articulate. They were nice. They were generous, and those kind of things really draw you to Islam. And then when you get in and you become engrossed in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so in that seeking, you might lose the perspective of people being human, and so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the best of mankind. And then you read these stories about the companions, and so in that seeking, you find some comfort in that. So knowing that you finally found a religion. And some of us, as I mentioned, we went through quite a few religions, quite a few movements, quite a few ideologies, and then we found Islam, and we went conviction, because you usually, for the most part, you usually enter in Islam with a conviction, even when you're seeking the Deen, and my experience of giving, countless people shahada, I used to go through all of this stuff and trying to explain to them what it means, right? What Islam is, the 5 pillars, 6 articles, and then come to find out that they were just already just ready. They were ready just to take the shahada, and they already came with a level of conviction and a level of sincerity, you know. And then when we see all of these movements, for some of us went through them, this the strand of Islam that we seen, uh, coming into it, a strand of Islam. I couldn't help it, man. And it was very interesting. It was very appealing, and so our experiences made us feel like, okay, this is the be all and end all. This was it. I've arrived. You know, but some of those things that, as I remember reading one time, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, may Allah preserve him, he said, he said that a person can be sincere in their delusion. A person can be sincere in their delusion. And then when you look at people who involved in movements and organizations, and when they're totally dedicated to it, it has long lasting implications. Uh, we shared this book before. We were talking about it's an author named Rick Ross, and he wrote a book called the Culture of Cults. All right, the Culture of Cults, and he was having a discussion. He put in the book an interview with one of the with Charles Manson, the Sharon Tate murders. And there was like 9 people involved, and the 3 young girls. One of them, she's still in jail today, and they blocking her release. I think the other 2 died. But when he producer interview, and I think this was like maybe 10 years ago. She was saying that, that happened in 1969. And she still was coming to the fact that, she felt like she wasn't in a cult. It still was like haunting her. Like she still saw Charles Manson as some type of savior, like a father figure, you know, and so when you get infiltrated by these kind of movements and these ideologies, um,
Let's pause 1 second.
absolutely.
Correctional officer 4, lockdown. If you want to take Shahada now, repeat after me. Say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, which could mean, and you can say it in English if you cannot pronounce the Arabic words, I know, I believe, and I declare that no one or thing deserves to be worshipped except God. And I know, believe, and declare that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Saying those words with belief in the heart will make you a Muslim. Say it now, don't delay. And Imam Faheem will be glad to help you. And you can reach us through our, platforms to get in contact with you. Go ahead, Imam. Sorry.
No, that definitely took precedence, mashallah. So if you've uttered those words, correctional officer, may Allah who subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and increase you. Welcome to the Deen of Allah who subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are here at your service. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Please be sure to email me, and inshallah we'll exchange numbers. That'll be a capital F. I think that's right. Okay. Yeah. And so I want. Oh, you can't put email addresses or something on YouTube. I guess you can't do it. I'll put it on Facebook. He's on Facebook, right? It didn't allow me to put anything on YouTube. All right. Okay, tight. All right, so let me get back.
Correctional officer, send your info, your phone number, contact, email to that email address, and we'll forward it and we'll get back in contact with you. I'll forward to Imam Fahim,
Okay.
inshallah.
So let me get back to when you experience all of these movements, the long term effects that they have, and so some of them have actually resembled cults, right? And some of them were actually cults, and when they discuss some of the characteristics, one of the things they discuss is that sometimes when you go through these movements and you realize or you come to terms that you've been bamboozled, you've been duped, sometimes it leads you to depression, to have grief, to not have trust, to question everything, to revise everything. And sometimes it can lead people to leave Islam, but for the one whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favors, they realize and they accept where the went wrong, And even and another myth is that, when a person is engaged in a cult or organization, it's like that, it doesn't attract like dumb people. Like you should never feel like you were dumb or played, because they said the majority of people are people who have something going on in life, they contribute, they're well off, they have vision, they have goals. Some of the things that they hear line up. So some of these things, if you ever had this experience, they're not all bad, They're not all bad, And so and I remember, in my seeking sincerely, after never fully experiencing you know, like any kind of cult. Like I used to read the Ansar books, there was a brother who was in Camden, and I used to go buy I used to buy the African medallions off him all the time, that were made in China, I think. So I used to go down there, buy books, have conversations with him every Saturday. And so I used to, for those who remember, like '89, Just Ice was where I got my inspiration from, Flavor Flav. So Just Ice used to have like a whole neck full of African medallions. So that's what I used to have. There's some pictures floating around on Facebook, but don't Google it though. Don't Google it, right? And so instead of wearing jewelry, I used to have all of these, like I'm talking about 20 of them, a big African clock. I had the wristbands. I had beads on the ankle. You couldn't tell me I wasn't no Jungle Brother. You know what I mean? And so so I never really got into the doctrine too much. Um, so I used to read a lot of his books, and I never really talked to people about it, but I used to remember reading some of the stuff, and I didn't know what the words meant. Like for instance, I remember this phrase. And I was talking to Imam Amin about it when he used to put hadiths in the book, and he used to say words of men, not Allah. And so that was just a phrase that stuck with me. And then all of this other stuff like the chisel deck and all this. I was like, what is this stuff, right? And but it was interesting as a reader because it was a lot of information. So even before I became Muslim, I was always like an avid reader. And so reading some of this stuff, and then it was at the point I was reading. I had read Dr. Bilal Phillips' book. He was supposed to do the refutation. No, I'm sorry. I didn't read Dr. Bilal Phillips' books, right? But I read Imam Isa's book. He had a 600-page book about, he was addressing that book. And I had never read that book, but I was in the county jail, I'll never forget. And it was like 600 pages. And I finished it because I was in the hole. I was in the hole. And this book was really thick. And he was responding to all of the allegations and stuff. And so I remember in my mind, like, man, who is this weirdo Dr. Bilal Phillips? It was like, he's supposed, somebody's supposed to take his head off. I mean, I wasn't in the Ansar, but that was my influence besides, listening to Farrakhan lectures. And that threw me for a loop one time when I went to see him in person at the Civic Center. And I remember them they was doing a green wave. Right? Like every 2 minutes they was passing buckets around, money. Yeah, and then they had a green wave that everybody take $1 out your hand, and it was like 15,000 people there. Throw it in there. And so I remember me and my sister went with one of her friends, and so my sister was like, "Hype, here come the bucket again. Put some more money in there." And I'm like, because I was hustling, I had bread. I was like, "Yo, we gotta get back across the bridge. I can't give them all my money, right?" So, and then that kind of like threw me for a loop, right? And so then I finally read Dr. Bilal Phillips' book, and I'm like, okay. But and then just seeing how people who came out of that movement, having debates with them, and at that time, as a seeker and trying to be sincere, I'm thinking like, okay, this was falsehood. This is it, Quran and Sunnah. Quran and Sunnah. And I remember in my early journey, just reading a lot of those books, and they used to have these footnotes, and it would give the reference of the hadith, because when I was in jail, we kind of knew like we would follow Quran and Sunnah at what we thought it was, but we didn't know that it was this whole movement. So it was like, okay, we already knew that Bukhari and Muslim was agreed upon, Mutafakun alayh, and the other 4 books in the 6, the Kutub al-Sitta, they had some, as if we had the ability to determine, like, you had weak hadith, but this was what they told us, right? Oh yeah, man, that hadith is not, it's not authenticated, stuff like that. And I remember seeing this name, Al-Albani, right? I remember seeing this name, and and so I never really paid attention to the references because and nobody was teaching us this kind of stuff. We didn't know anything about isnad and hadith science and how a person becomes a muhaddith and really scholarship. We were just reading books, and then we had the time to read the books. So and then I got out, and then I was hearing all of this stuff about, and I remember hearing this term Salafia, Da'wah to Salafia, but it was kind of relatively new. But the whole time I was incarcerated, I didn't hear like anybody, saying these kind of things. And then, we were hearing things about, people, Medina University and all of this stuff. And so the connection was like Medina University. This is Medina. This is Saudi Arabia. This is the Holy Land, the Prophet of Islam. This is the city of the enlightened city. So you putting 2 and 2 together, logically, we're thinking like, okay, if these people are coming out of Medina, they must have some type of connection. and not knowing the history, not knowing the history and not having anyone there to really just tell us about this kind of stuff. So this was all that we knew. And then, and so this putting it together, like, when we talk about trying to be a sincere seeker and then be a sincerely mistaken, or what I would like to say, being, authentically deprived, you know, being authentically deprived and not realizing the level of the deprivation, right? Because when we were reading books, and actually that's how I got this Imam position, because I sounded like I knew more than the average person, you know. And plus I knew how to recite the Quran relatively well. I had some training in that. And that was it. But I sounded like, I knew some of these terms about innovation and this is weak and this is that and this sheikh said that. And but I didn't know nothing, right? But to the person, like they say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? So I had one eye, so and and just realizing, and then here comes this wave, here comes this movement coming, and now, having some exposure to the Nation of Islam, and knowing that, okay, after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X for the second time, I read it when I was a juvenile, and then just realizing how all that transpired, and Malcolm became the hero, and realizing all of this stuff about the white man is the devil and all this nonsense, and then getting some exposure to the Ansar community, but not like in it, and then I had met some brothers when I came home and they was telling me stuff that I read about the green room, the green room. So Imam Isa was, I can't remember. It was 600 pages. I was like, man, but then other people was telling me that I met actual people that was a part of the group, right? And then some of them I remember I had seen before I got locked up, and then they went from all white thobes and everything to they was wearing like cowboy hats and stuff, and I was like, well, that's kind of weird, man, and and so then this movement came along where you had brothers that looked like us. They were reciting, the Quran in Arabic. They were reciting Hadith in Arabic. They were giving references. They were quoting stuff. They was, they dressed the part. Like, okay, wow. And then I remember this guy handed me a cassette tape. We speaking to our peers, right? Y'all already know what a cassette tape is, right? And so it was this. He gave me a tape, and the person who was on the tape was named Dawood Adib. And so I remember hearing about him one time. We had this series of lectures by Sheikh Hakeem Quick, Dr. Abdullah Hakeem Quick, and he was doing a lesson on the Sirah, and we had these on VCR tapes. So this is like '92, and I remember watching the series, and I was interested in history. Then I heard about people like Imam Zayd Shakir, may Allah preserve him, and so on those tapes with Dr. Quick, there was a brother in the audience, right? And he was kind of like refuting or challenging Dr. Quick. And then I went back when I remembered the name, it was Dawood Adib. So this brother gave me this tape. And so, he was like a very articulate speaker. He had he projected his voice really nice, and he seemed like he was talking, he knew what he was talking about. And then there was in the air this whole thing about, the righteous predecessors, the Salaf Salih. And I remember this one brother when I first came to the Masjid, that's all he was talking about. The Salaf Salih, after Salaf Salih, right? Okay, what is the Salaf Salih? And then at the same time, I remember these pamphlets they used to have right here at this Masjid they used to leave here. And they used to have these books. And at the end of it, he would say, Allah exists without a place, right? And I didn't know, I never thought about places or nothing that connected to Allah anyway, right? But I would like, that makes sense, but I didn't know how to make sense of it. Like, and so sometimes, if you don't have knowledge, your intellect can, it can trick you, and you be like, man, I feel like I don't know. But this phrase always stuck with me. Allah exists without a place, right? And I'm like, okay. And I could never put two and two together, Allah and the place. And so I just, but something stood out about that. And now that I know that was the belief of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? And then hearing other people start, they didn't talk about these things in detail, but it was all about personalities and quotes and references and ayats from the Quran and Hadith and then at this time I didn't know that they were selective and it was part of a methodology. And so, being in the movement, I became affiliated with the Madakhila or the Madkhalis, And so in our area, they're still kind of prevalent, So these were people who were, called themselves Salafis, but they liked the personality of the main scholar whose name was Rabi ibn Hadi al-Madkhali. And so he was like the sheikh. And come to find out, they only liked him and promoted him because he was harsh in his criticism of people. And so that resonated with a lot of people who like to hear that stuff. Like, you know how we are, when it's when the tea being drank, the tea being spread, we jump on that. But when it's come to academia, we're not the same. And so they were promoting him as the sheikh. And then I started hearing these other names, Ibn Abdul Wahab, they called him Sheikh al-Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah, he was called Sheikh al-Islam, and that was the main personality. And then, you start seeing these books. I remember one of my teachers, he was telling me, he gave me a copy of the book of The Prophet's Prayer Prescribed by, Al-Albani, And so at that time, I didn't know anything about madhabs as an organized body of knowledge. I knew about Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, and Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal. I read their biographies, right? But I never knew about madhabs as an organized body of knowledge, right? And so then the reading in his book, he was talking about madhabs and taqlid and the following opinions of men. And on the surface, that made sense, right? That made sense. Like, okay, why listen to what somebody else is saying when the text says it right here? I can go right there and read it for myself. I can research it myself. I have the ability, or that's what the idea was, right? And so this whole thing of people asking you where your dalil is, and so then this movement coming in, and then it just was like overwhelming, like people were quoting stuff, and then people who were dear, like Imam Siraj, may Allah preserve him. I had the chance to meet him twice in person. So he came to Camden, and he had married a brother, so he did 2 lectures. And then Dawood Adib came and did a lecture in Camden. And it was, I don't know if it's still a famous lecture now, but it was called, I can't remember, but it was like it was talking about giving dawah to Christians. But it was real famous at that time. And so these were the people who were the personalities. And then other people came. I remember our Imam in the prison. He was telling us about these young brothers coming back from Medina. And then I came to find out that these were brothers like Imam Abu Muslima and Abu Usama al-Dhahabi, and they used to have a connection with them. And so I guess around late 95, 96, where this whole, at least on my experience, started really taking off and flourishing, this movement, right? And so just hearing everybody talking about this personality, this when he graduated from Medina, and then I started hearing all of these things that were refutations, right? And it seemed like that's all that mattered, undermine the person that came before them. So they had me thinking bad about Dr. Quick, who I had to, benefited from. My mind didn't deceive me when I listened to the lecture about history, right? But now I'm like, okay, he gotta be questionable, like, because these people said it. They quoted Quran, they quoted Hadith, they quoted scholars. So something got to be wrong. Then they started talking about people that I met personally, like Imams Anwar and Anis. You can't take from them, because their minhaj ain't right. And I'm like, wait a minute. So, and then all of these things, even down to my very own Arabic teacher, and then even down to my my sheikh that's, telling me, I came to a point where I couldn't take them. So all of this stuff was like, what is this? It's not helping me at all. Like, I came into Deen seeking, and all I'm getting is this stuff. And so at first it was like, it was just like inwards, like these are just N-words, man. Because I peeped that a long time ago. These are just jokers don't know what they're talking about, but not realizing there was a whole methodology, right? And so when you put yourself, as Imam Amin was saying, put yourself in the mind frame of being, exposed to all that and really not knowing how to make sense of it, and then feeling the pressure of, if you don't fit in, you know, because that's what cults do. They give it this pressure for you to fit in and to, to not go against the grain, or they make you feel isolated or make you start doubting yourself, right? And so then I just noticed all of these personalities, and then it was every new personality, and they were all talking about the same thing, you know, authentic Quran and Sunnah, and bid'ah, and shirk, and all of these slogans, and you all probably remember one of them: "Let the Sunnah don't go forth and don't stop it." And then everybody who was a part of this movement, it seemed like it was growing. This was it. Brothers, wearing throws, wearing big beards, got their pants cut, and it's like, okay, man, and then they giving proofs, person, his pants is, below the ankle. He's in the hellfire. Yeah, the sooner the better. Okay, I don't want, so I don't want to be in the hellfire. So let me cut my pants. I don't want to be in hell, so I'm going to grow my beard, even though at that time it didn't grow. And all of this stuff started happening, and then you associate it as a seeker as being the truth because you already recognize some falsehoods from before. So this got to be it. I went through this. I grew up as a Christian. I entertained, not believing in God at one time, and stuff like that. So this got to be it. I know the Quran is true because I've read it. I believe in the Prophet ﷺ because I read this story. This got to be true. So, and then it's like, okay, people, when they talk about Quran and Sunnah, following the text, but then you're following someone's interpretation, right? And so this is where the stuff, where the rubber meets the road. And so as in my experience, I started seeing these things, and then you don't really pay attention until it affects you directly. And so I'm saying all of that, to say that, you can be a sincere seeker and be sincerely mistaken because, what you received was something that was, and who you received it from, it was the problem to begin with. And in that sincerity, sometimes you had to go back and look, and then and it's very difficult when you've been exposed to that stuff. Because I remember being in the mix with the madakhila, right? These people who, everything Sheikh Rabi said, there was like law. They used to have telephone conferences where they called them, and some of you remember this. And I used to be in those circles. Sheikh, what about a man who says such and so and so and so? He's the matruk, leave him, right? And then the next day, the internet started taking off. Yeah, Sheikh Rabi refutes such and such, and then they fill his name in there. And I used to have the AOL Messenger having all these debates, calling people's names. The same people that you listen to and got some benefit from. Here comes this other group telling you got to watch out for them, right? And I'm like, wait, I just talked to him, man. He was cool. Now you mean I got to watch out for him? Wait a minute, man. I just paid like $100 for this volume work. You mean to tell me I got to throw it away because it got weak hadith in it? You know what I'm saying? And all of this nonsense. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And the whole time I never put it together that it was an actual movement. It was an actual movement, and it was a whole methodology, And so, but I was always the type that I always analyzed what people told me, even if it was something that went against what I was convinced about. And so I remember somebody, it was Usulu Thalatha, right? When it first came out, it was nice, shiny, nice blue and white cover, nice print, beautiful, right? And so, and one brother, I remember him saying like, "Oh, you mean Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, the killer of Muslims?" And I was like, "What? The killer of Muslims? This is Sheikh al-Islam. This is the one who, in the biography, look right here, he purified the lands for for Tawheed, and he was the reviver, and he studied this and and but that always stuck in the back of my mind. So now I'm looking at it now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was moving me through this stuff to arrive at Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And so I don't want to go on too much, but it was just showing that you can be a sincere seeker and be sincerely mistaken, because if you don't identify these things or even be willing to accept that you've been played. And so this has a impact even on someone who, follows Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah completely, right? If you've been through that stuff, sometimes it's still difficult to sit down. How do you know it's true? Because it makes you start to question everything. How do you know this is true? Okay, they saying this over here, and you saying this over here. How I'm supposed to know? This is appealing. They gave a proof. They gave a dalil. They gave evidence. They quoted the scholars. And so all this kind of stuff, it can be really confusing. And just imagine what it can do to a person. And I've got at least a dozen stories of people who apostated, not just leaving the deen. I mean, not just stopped practicing, but actually like went back to church, like tambourine shaking, fan, third row passing out kind of thing, and it's like because they couldn't keep up. This is the thing they couldn't keep up with the Salafi Joneses. You remember that phrase about keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with the people with status quo? They couldn't keep up with the Salafi Joneses because everything was about who was going to get thrown off the minhaj next. Nothing about tazkiyah, nothing about purifying yourself, nothing about encouraging you to do good deeds. Everything was about splitting from your family or splitting from Muslims. If they weren't on the minhaj, your family that raised you, took care of you, paid your bill, looked out for you was down. You can't talk to them no more because they're kuffar. And if you agree with them, then you become the kafir, all this kind of stuff. And, you can't hang out with your friends. You can't talk to them. And all of this stuff took a toll. And then, personally, I was like, my name was mentioned, like thrown under the bus. My name was mud in this area. You know what I mean? And so brothers that I used to pray with in the masjid at least 2 or 3 times a day, now not salamming me, brothers that I helped out and stuff like that. Now they're not talking to me, and come to find out because somebody told them that my minhaj wasn't clear. Not that I wronged them, not that I said anything to them, not that we had a falling out, but I didn't toe the line like they thought I was supposed to, right? And Imam Amin mentioned something that even when they threw me out of the minhaj, right, threw me off the minhaj, I still had a part of me that I was still wanted to be a part of it. Like, so they had this thing where it was like a tribunal, like, I had to meet with a certain group, but then I had to make my stance clear. And then I had to, right? And so the first time I was like, okay, you know what? I might have been wrong. Let me make my stance clear. And then they tried to do it again because I didn't really, I was never like a total follower of anything like that. You know what I mean? So, okay, wait a minute, man. I'm my own man. You know what I'm saying? This is where I'm at. I don't, and all this kind of about personality. What's your view on this person? Sheikh such and such said we not to take from him. I'm reading his books. So now I become a suspect. I remember being in their inner circles because they got the circles, then they got the inner circles, right? And then they got the people who are like the connected, like a mafia family. They got the capos and they got the people, and then it's like 2 or 3 of them that are together all the time, even that someone in the inner circle might not know. And I remember one brother, he told me he was really upset. He was like, he said this. It was one of the brothers that he was dear to me at that time. But because he got caught up and bamboozled, and he's still in it because he's afraid to realize he got duped, he told me, he said, man, it's hard being in the loop. It's hard being in the loop and listen to all this nonsense and knowing in your heart that it has no benefit for you at all, right? But because you're afraid to be, ostracized or marginalized or, excommunicated or whatever, And so this is the impact of these movements and how it can, it can really destroy a person who's sincerely seeking. And, and then there's a lot of people who were really sincerely seeking the truth. And these people seem to have the truth, right? They seem to have it. It had all of the things lined up that seemed like, this was it. This is the be all and end all. Okay, I've been through the nation. I've been through the Ansar community. I've been through, Fuqara Jamaat. I've been through all of these movements, right? And now I've arrived, where I can go to the Quran and the Sunnah directly, and I can follow my deen that way. I don't even need to follow nobody. Right here is the text in front of me, And so all of that stuff, it involves deeper discussions. But when you go back and look at it now, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you tawfiq, you had to go back and honestly look at it and just feel like and know that it was a dupe. It was a bamboozlement. And not everybody can make it out because now you see, and I've seen in my in my experience that people are afraid to admit that they've been played, and so like people who are vocal are quiet now. People are sitting on the sidelines. People being in backgrounds, they agree with you, but they won't come out and say anything because they're afraid of being criticized again, and all of these kind of stuff. But then you see it on other like levels where people are still not coming to terms that it was a whole methodology, even though you benefited from it, even though you got some knowledge from it, even though there were some things that helped you along. Overall, it was the people that taught you were also deprived. And then it had to. I know for me, it had to make me go back and look at things like in a different light. Okay, there's a difference between scholars and scholarship, right? There's a difference between scholars and scholarship, right? Yeah, yeah, brother Raheem, I had to admit, like, really, hold on, man. I really got played. I was really believing this stuff, like, with all these personalities, and not knowing that this was a movement that was being presented to me as the absolute truth. And it was always the same books, the same scholars, the same ideology, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, how come? And I remember one day, man, I picked up Akida Atahawi, the English translation, right? And now nobody had ever in the time when I was in that movement, right? Nobody had ever discussed this book that I heard of, right? And only later I would come to find out that they had their own commentary on Akida At-Tahawi, right? Which is not, the main commentary, or not even considered one of the major commentaries, right? And so, but I remember reading this book, and I'm going over the points, nothing is comparable, nothing is equal to him. And I remember asking the brother, and at that time I didn't. This was like mid '90s, late '90s. I wasn't paying attention to Hijri dates and who the Salaf who were actually the Salaf. It was all about Salafiyah, right? Not who the actual Salaf were. So I wasn't paying attention to Hijri dates and stuff like that because everything was about Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, Ibn Abdul Wahhab, Al-Albani, Uthaymeen, Bin Baz, Fawzan, Muqbil, and the Rabi al-Mathali, Ahmed al-Najmi, some of these people. I remember all that stuff, right? Yeah, man.
Boy, you're digging deep. You was like a super Wahhabi, huh? You're digging deep.
Was, man.
Most people probably don't even know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
You're digging deep.
I was in the loop, man. And that was all I was being exposed to. So it's like no other scholar, none of these people existed except these people. Then, Al-Albani students, Salim Halali, Ali Hassan al-Halabi, these were the Kibar. These are the Kibar ulama, and their students were from the Kibar of the Tulab, right? All of this stuff. And now I'm thinking back, because now they started cleaning their act up, right? I remember reading the stuff on one of some of you probably remember this. I don't want to go too deep, but Salafi Publications used to have a forum called SalafiTalk.net. And so all types of discussions on there. But now I'm looking back, it all revolved around the same thing. I remember them saying that Al-Albani was the Ibn Taymiyyah of this time, and Ali Hassan al-Halabi was the Ibn Qayyim of this current era. I remember them reading, and you probably can't find it now. They said that Al-Albani, Uthaymeen, Bin Baz, and I forget who the other one was, Muqbil, that they were mujtahidun mutlaqun. And I knew what, I had an idea what a mujtahid was, but they said that they were absolute mujtahids. I remember reading this with my own eyes. And now it's like when you realize that you've been duped, a part of it has to be you have to reserve yourself to not become angry. Because I'm thinking about it now, like, yo, they had the audacity to say that. Like, the Muslim Ummah is not reading this stuff. I remember reading that with my own eyes. They said that they were mujtahidun mutlaqun, absolute mujtahids.
I wonder if you could do a search and find it. You know, I never heard that, but I would love to see that myself. Not
Yeah,
that I don't believe you,
yeah.
because you know you are thiqat, you are thiqat, and then you are among the thiqat, right? But
Nah,
I would actually love to actually see that or
yeah,
hear it.
yeah, I'm gonna try to find it.
But
But
it's
then
too
I
hard
remember,
to go search.
yeah, we can search, but
Yeah,
they,
bring your Dalil, Ak.
yeah, but they would, they started deleting a lot of stuff, man. Where they start when they started getting exposed and challenged, they started deleting a lot of stuff because even in their intramural beefs, because the Methali is one branch that used to beef with every other Salafi, so all of the other Salafis were not Salafi enough with them, and so their attack was on within their group, right, within their umbrella. They was the ones that was only right. Everybody else, because I remember a time that they had uh Uthaymeen on the ropes. Ben Baz wasn't supposed to be trusted. And it was all about Al-Albani and his hadith gradings, right? And then all these people until they had until the what's the scholarly group in Saudi Arabia, the Council of Scholars, right? And it was one particular brother, I remember his name, and him and Sheikh Rabi, I think you probably know about this, Imam Amin. Him and Sheikh Rabi had a falling out. And this is how I got through off the minhaj. So him and Sheikh Rabi, I forget his name. He was from Yemen, right?
Are you talking about Abu Hassan al-Ma'rabi?
Yeah, yeah. Abu Hassan al-Ma'rabi. Him and Sheikh Rabi had a falling out, and the way from the Salafi side that I was part of, that he was this innovator and all this kind of stuff. But then when I heard it from Abu Osama that, because he used to be in Philly, and I used to talk to him a lot, and so he was like, nah, I was called the Lejna. So they went against the legend. I don't know. So he was doubting it. And when he made it vocal, like, I don't know if Sheikh, this is what he said. He said, from what I experienced, I think Sheikh Rabi is incorrect in this issue. And boy, that was the nail in the coffin. And that's when they started conspiring in private to overthrow him when he was the Imam in Germantown. They had the secret group going through all this stuff. Yeah, hit him with this, hit him with this. Trying to call him on three-way with somebody calling to someone else on the other line, eavesdropping, spying, all this stuff, the simple stuff that's haram, right? All this kind of stuff to get information on him to throw him off the minhaj. And whoever didn't agree with them, they got thrown off the minhaj. Then it was people who was in their group and they were suspect until they told the line. What's his name? What's the heavyset brother's name that passed away? The one they said we need a Ramadan. He had a famous talk where he said we need a
You
Ramadan.
talking about up in Newark, Abu Uwais?
Abu Uwais, yeah. I remember when they had him on the ropes. They were plotting until he kind of like they reeled him back in, and so he had to like validate himself by being this tough guy. And you all remember he was refuting Abu Osama, calling him Goldie and all that. And so it was some funny stuff, man. And then it came to a point like, wait a minute, this stuff is retarded, man. Like, come on, like we sitting around here waiting who's going to be thrown off the minhaj next, and it's like, hopefully it ain't me. Well, let me make sure I'm crossing my T's, dot my I's, and saying everything correct, and all this nonsense, But in that, I still, Allah knows best that I was sincerely seeking, and I believe that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed me from that because, I was open enough to realize that this was something else. And then I started meeting people.
Ma'am, I'm gonna go pray real quick. Can you hold it down for about 10 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you pray. All right.
Okay. And so then I started realizing that, okay, there's something more to this that I'm missing, right? And so then I started hearing other things from other people who were non-Salafis, all the people. And so I was the type that, if you told me not to listen to somebody, that was more of a reason for me to hear what they had to say. You know what I mean? Even when I went to school, you know how you went to school, like, oh, such and such, don't stay away from him. You stay away from him, man. He bad dope. And so that made me like, let me go see if this is true, and that was from before I was Muslim. So when I used to hear about these people, let me hear what they have to say. And then I started listening to the other side, these people who were so-called deviants, right? And I remember, I told you about when they said that that these Albani, Uthaymeen, bin Baz, Mukbil were mujtahidun mutlaqun, absolute mujtahids, right? And then this brother I work with, his name is Hamza. MashaAllah, may Allah preserve him. A martial arts brother out of Philly. We used to do like leg removal and stuff like that. And so he loved Sheikh Hamza Youssef, and he had this series that you can still find online that Sheikh Hamza did this talk. It was called the prerequisites or the qualities or the characteristics of the mujtahid. It's like a series. You probably can still find that online. And I remember listening to this, and then I'm like, wait a minute. I remember I read all the biographies of these kibar ulama, right? These major scholars, and none of them that I remember reading about their biographies had any of that. Like maybe one of them memorized the Quran, one or two, having a history of teacher to student learning from a madhab. They didn't have any of that. Self-taught in some instances, who approved, who gave them ijazah. And then I would go, listen to this and going back, they say ijazah is nothing but a piece of paper, right? And it's a science, it's an academic science of making sure a person is academically and scholarly equipped to teach. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started making other openings for me, and then I would meet other people, like Sheikh Abdullah ibn Hamid Ali, may Allah preserve him, listening to, he had went to school in Morocco, and we used to have some private classes with him. I met Sheikh Abdurrahman Asandalani, that he was a loud voice back then. Then I started to see a shift in people that I knew, like Imam Anwar, Imam Anis, who were, we know the story of Imam Anwar Muhammad and his brother. He graduated, Imam Anwar graduated from the top of his class in Medina. When he graduated, out of all the people who come from all over the world, even Arabs, he was number one in his class. And even these people who started, his detractors, like Dawood Adib, they would say something, you can't take from him. And he was Hafiz of Quran, right? And but then they take from him. I started seeing a shift in them, where they started becoming like Maliki and stuff. So, and back then I didn't know anything about the madhabs and the rulings of what's mu'tamad in the school, and how they arrive at rulers and stuff like that, and how they kept harmony throughout the ages, even with their different and varying views within the schools we related to Ahkam, right? Yeah, and scholars like Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, Sufi scholars, I didn't hear nothing. You know what I'm saying? Nada, zilch, right? And then it was like more openings started to come up. And then I remember, so I got thrown off the minhaj like 99, 2000, right? And I remember Sheikh Nur Hamid Keller had wrote an article, and he refuted the Salafis right back then in like 95, 96. I think he wrote an article. And I remember reading that, and I was like, wow, this is something different. But then the Wahhabi Salafi voice was louder. And I remember specifically Imam Abu Muslima, he was doing a lecture or something, and they asked him about that. And he mentioned Sheikh Nur's name, and he said, he must be related to Helen Keller because he's blind as a bat, right? So just attacking his character, but never mentioning his scholarship. And so I didn't know the level of somebody like Sheikh Nur Hamid Keller. They just never, anybody who opposed them, it was like they wasn't nothing, but these people were already qualified. Anybody who didn't agree with their doctrine, they just, did a smear campaign on them. So if you in that movement, even if you're sincere, you thinking that that's it because that's all you've been exposed to. And for many of us, that's how it was. All we were is exposed to this total bombardment of personalities, names, certain books, certain slogans, other, principles and stuff like that we didn't really know. And we were relying on people who only had a piece of it, and it was distorted. They had a piece of it that they chose and select from somebody who chose and selected on their own without the formality of the training that we know today as Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and that was already known, but it was just not a loud enough voice to counter it. It was just not a loud enough voice to counter it. And so then in that journey, I started becoming aware of more scholars, and even more scholars in the time, of the considered the Caliph, the time before Ibn Taymiyyah and the time after Imam Ahmed. And so you never really hear Wahhabis talk about this period. And during this period, we had some of the greats like Imam Ghazali. And I remember first hearing about Imam Ghazali, and I remember reading the Ihya, and it was eye opening. Like, okay, this is some deep stuff, man. Because when you even if you a person who's studious and reading, you're still looking for something that that nurtures the soul. And then I'm reading. I asked the brother, I said, "Yeah, I read this book called the Ihya Ulumuddin." He said, "Oh no, we can't read that out. Why? It got weak hadith in it. And so when all you exposed to this, and we've read the Ihya here, and we've seen people read it, like when all you know is what they've been feeding you, that it's like that's all you get. It's like that joke that that Eddie Murphy said on one of his stand up. He said, if you hungry and somebody give you a cracker, you think that's the best cracker you ever ate. What was that? A Ritz? That had to be a Ritz. Then after a while, it's the same old cracker. It's the same old books. It's the same old scholars. It's the same old slogans. It's the same old methodology. And so we got tired of those crackers, because they leave you hungry for more, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't have mercy on you to explore, you'd be like, okay, I can't be a part of this, Yeah. They used to have me thinking Imam Ghazali was this big, like, just deviant, stuff like, Ibn Taymiyyah making takfir Ibn Arabi. And I'm thinking like, Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam, he did all this stuff. He fought against the Mongols. Like, so that's it. Not knowing the rules of takfir, that it's not based on someone's individual ijtihad. And so ijtihad is not used when you're talking about, removing someone from Islam. That's and how Wahhabis understand ijtihad. So they understand that you make your best effort. They don't understand it as a science of who's a mujtahid. They understand it that ijtihad is that you making a concentrated and exerting yourself and coming to a judgment. And if you get it right, you get a reward. And if you get it wrong, you get two rewards. And so this is part of the thing where, they could say something about somebody, someone's a deviant, and because they said it and they talk about this principle of ijtihad, that it was correct. And we've already been programmed to think that these people were on a level that they never really were, to be honest. These people that they put us as scholars, they put forth as scholars, they were never even on it. And if some of you remember in that movement, there was a scholar, I think he's still alive, Sheikh Abdul Muhsin Al-Abad. And so he has stepped in and he started countering some of this stuff and started receiving help from other people who weren't a part of that certain strand of Wahhabism, right? They were more moderate, and so they were feeding information to him. And so he started, he was like a big homie calling shots. And some of those scholars that they was calling Alama and the Imam of Jarh wa Ta'dil, and the one who this was my favorite, that he knew the secret hiding places of the people of Bid'ah. They brought him to America one time too. His name was it was Sheikh Fauzi or something. And they brought him here like he was the man, right? But to be honest, he was a kook, right? He was a academic kook, Sheikh Fauzi Al-Athari, I think that was his name. And so when all of this stuff started coming out, the Sheikh Abdul Muhsin Al-Abad started pulling their cards. He said, oh, this one, out of a class of 100 and 10 students, he was 103rd. This one doesn't even have this kind of qualifications. But when he came to America, these were the kibar ulama, right? And reality, as Dr. Ingrid Masson said one time, she said that a professor in a university is not a scholar. A professor in a university is not a scholar. And the person who graduates from a university is necessarily not a scholar either. And so start learning all of this stuff, what scholarship was, what the tradition of Islam was, And then so it's like start opening up all the eyes. But alhamdulillah, I thank Allah who's subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing me with sincerity to be able to, see these things and have an open vision. And the first thing is like Imam Amin mentioned, like when you're in NA and AA, is the first thing is to admit that you had a problem. And so that was it for me. I had to first admit that I was duped. I had to first admit that all of the stuff that was feeding me was incorrect on some level, on enough that it had to make me go back and realize that I've been duped. And I had to go look back at everything with a new lens, And then things started, start discovering things. Okay, this person was never what they put them to be. This person never had this scholarship. And then reading even some of their things, it was embedded in that, where they would say, I never claimed to be this. I was only a criticizer. I never said I was the Imam of Jahwa Ta'dil. I was just a criticizer. And, and so people took it somewhere else with this movement and exaggeration of personalities who never really reached the level of scholarship, right? And so all of those things, to say that, just keep, sincerity, because, sometimes you can be deluded in it, and it's happening to many people that we know that they're afraid to admit, because no one, growing up in the environment that we grew up in, no one wants to admit that they dumb, right? No one who would admit and say that I've been played. No one is going to admit that openly, unless someone whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given favor to, right? No one's gonna, because I'm studying just like you studying. I read this. I'm not dumb. I know what I'm doing. But you never knew the system that was handed to you and the one that was held back from you, right? And so now and so some people who have some tawfiq in it, they're cleaning up their act, Okay, we don't blindly follow methods, but we recognize them, We don't follow tasawwuf as per se as a tariqah, but it's taskiyah to nafs, and doing this according to the sunnah. It's the same thing tasawwuf is. Okay, we don't talk about these issues of aqidah, or when they feel like, when they know that they've been exposed, then they just won't discuss it. We just leave these matters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all of those things that you have to go back and realize where you've been duped, it's very difficult. It is very difficult to know that all the time you put in studying and following and trusting people. And not only did, were they deprived, some of them ended up, and then there was another part that some of them ended up being charlatans. Like Imam Amin was mentioning when he saw Imam Isa kissing a woman, like, and then I seen some things with people like, wait a minute, man, all this knowledge, you this, that, and the other, and you doing this? And so, but it's a journey that's important, because everybody's not blessed to learn the tradition of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, And even if they seem like they're good people, they're studious people, they're sincere people, they love Islam, they love Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they've been deprived. And they have to understand that they've been deprived first in order to get over that hump. And a lot of people, that's like looking in the mirror when when you're a messed up person. That's like trying to look at yourself, when you did something wrong. Who wants to go back and do that? You know what I'm saying? And, a lot of people are not willing to do that. And they would just rather stay complacent, not learn, not go outside of their comfort zone, and just, okay, yeah, this is just how it is. And, and we make dua for these people. So these are the people that, in our journey, we try to instruct and try to help along and, have mercy on them and understand where they at. Because sometimes you have to understand where people are at. They just don't know. They only know what they've been exposed to. Like in the words of the famous urban businessman Stringer Bell, the ninja only knows what he knows. People, been affected by these movements and these strands. They only know what they know. And then to learn something new is very difficult and very intimidating. It's intimidating to learn something new and to learn that what you learned before was not only wrong, it was just, it wasn't even really beneficial like that. And then you see people, now they don't want to cling to any kind of movement. Everything is up for, revision. Everything, Everything is pros and cons, a compare and contrast. Nothing is nothing is divinely revealed, and this kind of stuff like that. These are the works of men, and all that kind of stuff. And so this is the stuff that happens when you've been betrayed. You try to tell your mind that it wasn't really you. It's something wrong with what you've been exposed to, and now you try to go around it, but never accept that you've been duped. So I'll stop there because I'm going to pray, and I'll leave it to Imam Amin, inshallah.
Now, Faheem, before you go, do you realize you just talked about 50 years or more in our own African community, African American community? I ain't talking about nobody else. You talked about more, but I'm talking about in the African American community. You just talked about 50 years of being sincerely mistaken.
Mm.
50 years or more of being sincerely mistaken. That's a deep, and we gotta flush that out. You just talked about 50 years.
Yeah.
When I wrote them down. I was writing as you was talking names, and each of these names have a story.
Mm.
Like, and every single person you mentioned were at one point the leading figures, especially in the African American communities, of that da'wah. And every single one of them, with no exception, is now considered to be a deviant. That's some deep stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone you mentioned, I want y'all to pay attention to this. And we're going to flush this out. Going to get us in trouble, but hey, we like trouble. Don't matter. Like, that's part of being a YN, right?
Yeah.
Right, look, bring me all the smoke. I want all the smoke, right?
I'm
That's
a chimney. I'm a chimney out here. Bring me all the smoke.
right. But now, on a serious tip, that's something to think about. You're talking about 50 years or more of being sincerely mistaken, because all of those figures you mentioned, and
All right,
why?
let me
Go ahead,
go.
go ahead. I'll come back to. When you come back, I want to touch on it.
Okay.
Um. So yeah, this was interesting. Imam Faheem was, really, 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 really. I want y'all to write this down. I'm sorry, I'm a slow typer. I was too busy being a knucklehead in school, and I never learned how to type. I thought it was for suckers, right? Now the same skill I needed, I don't have it. Can y'all copy this? And you want to correct it, you can. But I just wanted to get the point. Can everybody copy and paste that? We just indicated to a more than should be 50-year campaign of indoctrination in the African American Muslim community. Can y'all copy that? Fix it. We just indicated to a more than 50-year campaign of indoctrination in the African American Muslim community. That's some deep stuff, right? Put that up. More than 50 years between me and Imam Faheem, just talking about our lives and our experiences. We talked about more than 50 years of indoctrination in the African American Muslim community. That's some powerful stuff, man. Like, when you really, 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 really think about it, you're talking about a serious issue, right? That we should really, really think about, reflect upon, ponder, and it should produce. I got you, Habib. You have to wait like 20 minutes. I might like you, but I don't like you that much where I'm going to stop my whole thought and everything I wanted to talk about to address your problem. I will address it, but not just stop what I'm doing. So you got to chill. If you got to run, you can just catch the recording, but you got to wait. I love you. I don't get offended because I recognize we're still all learning. It don't bother me when you go all off and typing. That stuff don't offend me, man. I've been around too long. Like I'm an old head now. It don't bother me. So just chill for a minute. I got you covered, right? Uh, um, yeah, that's something to think about, right? And I wish everyone copy and paste that. Could y'all do that for me, just to keep it in our mind? Like if all y'all could copy and paste, it's a bunch of y'all in here, so it should be like 100 posts right in there just for this point. Because if you ponder on this, you know, there's two concepts that we should keep in Islam, especially from the side of spirituality. Even in the Quran, even in the Hadith, in the books of the scholars, the creation, events, at-tariq, wal-hawadith, everything we should do have two concepts, at-tadabbur and at-tafakkur, right? Right? At-tadabbur and at-tafakkur. Pondering and reflecting on everything you experience. It's just life, right? But especially when we talking about, when we be talking, it's not just wasted time. It's actually something we need to think about, reflect upon it. It's serious because it's our lives and it's our progeny. Our future generations are going to be confronted with this stuff and more, which I didn't even discuss yet, which was really the topic. We just went historically and we didn't even get to what we was really talking about in terms of the point, but it's a continuation and a turn of it. So put that up just so we can have it, right? But when you think about that, that's just in the African American community, the African American Muslim community. If we expanded that to include other communities, it would get much more detailed and nuanced, right? And if you're talking about the past, more nuanced. So there's a lot of things to think about here, right? And when I went to pray, I was talking to my wife about uh, a more closer how she grew up. And all of us grew up in our communities in cults. We just didn't call it a cult. And there needs to be a serious definition of what a cult is so that we would recognize it, right? And she sent me just a point of a cult definition, just one definition. We may have difference. It says cults. No, that's not it. Let me look. They describe a cult as a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. A relatively small group of people having religious beliefs and practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. A misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. And if we look at what we've been through, what I described, what Imam Faheem described, all of this all of these movements that we've experienced have an undertone of a cult. Some are severe, some are, moderate, some are mild, but they all have this similar theme of what a cult is like. And that's no fault of our own. That's what has been presented to us. That's why we keep changing. The fact that we have to constantly change is an indication that we've been sincerely mistaken in our learning and our identification of, you know, cultish mindset, right? And then we need to reflect and ponder on that stuff so that we can come out anew and refreshed. Because like Imam Faheem, man, I know many people that came up with me, they shot, right? They don't even believe in religion at all, no religion, period, because of what they've been through. And some of them, they're swinging between Ansar stuff, Sunni Islam, just all over the place. And some just burnt the hell out altogether. So, and that happens in every movement that happened through, like in our experience, through the nation, through, through the More Science Temple, through Five Percenters, through all these different, man, there's so many movements that we've been through as a people. Now, the Wahhabi, Salafi stuff, Sufi burnout, it's a lot of stuff. And if we discussed it academically, that's the new term. You know, we're just speaking as academics, right? You know, academically speaking, you know, that's the new strand, the new strand, right? You got all the stuff we're dealing with, right? And we still got to preserve Islam. I was talking to my wife this morning, and I said to her, I said, you know, like identifying not only our mistakes, but how to continue going despite our mistakes. Like, for instance, we've made Islam people. And when people go wrong, we have to remember that Islam is still right. Because she asked me, how did you come up? I said, because I never blamed Islam for the mistakes of human beings. I was young enough to realize that the human error doesn't necessarily entail an error in the deen. That means humans, they make mistakes. And that's human beings. They don't have to be sinister to make a mistake. They can be sincerely mistaken, right? I was young enough to realize that, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, Al-yawmu akmaltu lakum dinukum, right? Wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-islam dina. I understand that, right? That this day I completed for you, right? Your religion. And I completed my favor and I perfected my favor upon you, and I am accepting for you Islam as a way of life. Not human beings. Human beings, they're gonna make mistakes. The deen is kamil, it's perfected. Now, us figuring that out is another story, and that's a job. But it has nothing to do with Islam. It's just people. People make mistakes. And cults will give people an aspect of divinity, and we don't realize it. Even if we won't say this person is God, we be looking at human beings as if they have the answers that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can provide, right? This is serious stuff. It's deep layered when you think about it, right? So once we get that, we can navigate, because we have to navigate, right? Our teachers used to say to us, Al-Islam is true, and everything other than is false, right? And that stuck in my mind. He didn't say human beings got all the answers and they're true. He said Islam is true, right? But human beings, they could be right and they could be wrong. That's human beings. And that don't mean because they're wrong that they did that intentionally. They could have just erred, but it's still wrong. And they may sometimes be forgiven for their errors, but we don't pick up the error. We say that's an error. That's important to understand. But one point I wanted to make is you need to discuss these matters so that when you're confronted with them in your own life, you have some kind of a roadmap how to deal with it, right? So when we tell our story like this, and then when we have to discuss new information and new stories, you don't take it so personal as if it's an attack. You understand that we all been through it in some form, right? We all been through it in some aspect. Now, collectively, from these shared experiences, we can know how to, find the shore, inshallah, after traveling on this ocean of strong winds and huge waves and everything and storms, we find a port in the storm. I think that's something we really, really have to think about. And because think about it, all these people he mentioned, I'm going to share the list. And I'm saying the name because he mentioned all the names. And I added one name that seemed in my area. I remember, and he was proceeding to them. And I got more, but I'm not going to put everybody's name out there. But the names you mentioned, I remember Bilal Phillips was the man. Now, I never been a Wahhabi. I never been a Salafi. I never been none of that, right? I had a different route. I never was in a nation. I came a different route. I came from the Ansars to Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, right? That was my turn, right? So even seeing that disaster of Imam Isa, it pushed me, not by my own choosing, through that, it pushed me back to my neighborhood, which led me to the streets, which the streets got me in trouble, and trouble got me to Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. That's what happened to me, right? And it was no doing on my own. It wasn't something that I planned. It wasn't something that I thought about. I got myself in some trouble, and I landed in Cairo, Egypt, and Azhar University. And in that environment, that's what happened to me. And from that environment, I learned Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah for the rest of my life, up to this day. I got around scholars, I got around people, I was in the houses of scholars. I just, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favored me with it. That's it. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't like I'm smart and because I'm so intelligent. No. Bifadlillah, by the generosity of Allah and his favor, that's what happened. And probably for most of us, it was like that. Some maybe made dua and Allah, right? And we're still on that journey. But when I say that, don't think in the journey you didn't still go across as a Sunni things you had to navigate, groups you had to navigate, different firaq within Ahl Sunnah have to navigate. That stuff still go on to this day. It's not stopped. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us with and tried us with. There's always going to be something to deal with. There's always going to be something to use your intellect, to reflect and ponder and research and study and reevaluate. That's always going to exist. And if you wonder that doesn't happen, you should question yourself, right? You should say, am I that deluded? That I'm protected from the whole world and all the confusion that's going on in the world and my stuff is sound? It could happen, but that's not the norm, right? But let's let's quickly talk about Bilal Phillips was the man. And I remember in the Ansar days, he was the only quote unquote Orthodox Muslim that was a challenge. He's off the minhaj. Abdullah Hakim Quick, I remember when his tapes and his videos was like he was the man in the Salafi Wahhabi doc off the minhaj. Dawood Adib. Dawood Adib, I want to have a conversation with him in public, right? I had a private conversation with him. And that joint got turned into a bunch of lies, but I'm a man of my word, so I never revealed all the lies that was in that meeting when it became public. But I would love, out of respect, and I hope he's listening and you can take it to him, because I tried to reach out to him, is an open invitation for Dawood Adib to come on a Black Imams Roundtable and have a real heart-to-heart conversation, not a debate, because if we have a debate, he ain't coming. So no debate. Just your younger brothers to an elder brother, real discussion about reality and experience in the religion. We all been through it, and you're an elder, and you have these conversations with others. We want that conversation, right? You've been on many platforms. Have the conversation with us. You tell your story, you tell your stuff. We would like to have that conversation. And me and you should have that conversation. We've had it before, but it was private. Let's have that conversation in public. The same conversation we had privately that you asked me about, let's have it in public. And I promise I'll be on my best behavior, right? I promise. And Imam Faheem is a witness. Imam Faheem, have I not tried to reach out to Dawood Adib to have this conversation?
Yeah, even had me calling.
Right. I'm not exaggerating. I think a real conversation with Dawood Adib and us would be amazing for our people collectively. And he's an elder, so he should be respected as an elder, despite we may disagree. Who cares? We disagree about basketball, football, about life. People do. But I think that would be a beautiful, real good, deep conversation. And it can be layers to it. We don't got to do everything in one. I think we need to have that conversation. So especially him, right? And so tell him Imam Amin said, let's do it. I told him, so he already know. I've actually tried. I was going to go to his house to have this conversation. That's how bad I want to have this conversation with him. Because I think at his age now, if he's completely honest, it'll be an entirely different conversation. Because all of us, we had a discussion, how long, many years ago that was when I had the discussion with him, Imam Faheem? That was about 20 years ago.
Over.
Yeah, over 20 years.
Yeah.
We had a conversation, me and him, in his house, privately. And when I talked to him, he asked me about the tape. I said to him, I don't know where that tape is, bro. You told me don't spread it, and I'm a man of my word. I never spread it, right? So he do remember, because he asked me about the tape. And I don't know what the tape is. You told me this is between us, don't spread it. I've never spread it to this day. What was said? Now they flipped it, and Imam Faheem's a witness, but let's have it public so there's no doubt what was said, no doubt. And it don't got to be a debate. I'm talking about a serious, because now we're talking over 20 years of experience and in movement. And at that time, you was the man. You ain't the man no more, right? So it could be a different conversation. You don't have the same things to protect, because you, at that time, you was worrying about getting thrown off the minhaj yourself. And you was at the head of throwing people off the minhaj. Now you ain't that guy. So now you can look back with a whole different look, right? As well as me. I was a whole different person when I met you. And I've learned different things and discovered different things in 20-something years. So it's a whole different conversation. And 20 years ago, where was you, Imam? You was
I was actually I was in a dark place, man. No, seriously. I was at that time. I was like trying to get back in and get my minhaj back to 6 o'clock. You know what I mean? Straight up
Yes.
and down. I had to make clarification. I had to make bayan. They had to call overseas and make sure I was clear. And if I didn't get the clearance, he's not clear until the sheikh say he clear. And I'm just a nigga from Camden. What sheikhs know me?
No, it's serious stuff.
Yeah.
So I just because we mentioned Dawood Adib, and I reached out to him. So because a lot of people think we just be talking about Salafis. No, we'll have a conversation.
Mhm.
We don't listen. We don't have to debate because it ain't even a debate at this stage. We might just clarify some stuff, and then later, if you want to debate doctrine, that's another separate subject. That that's something else. But really, it's not a debate. We really had a need to have a discussion before a debate, like to identify where the heck we at as a people, because the Dawood Adib I met 20 years ago is not the same, or over 20 years, is not the same Dawood Adib today. And the Imam, the Amin Muhammad, when he met me, I wasn't even an Imam, right? I was just a young guy fresh out of prison, right? So there's a whole different experience. That'd be a whole different conversation, right? And I think we should have it. So all of you, spies who be, taking the tea back, take that back to Dawood Adib. Tell him I gave him my phone number, I called him, and I was supposed to meet with him. He never did it. So now I'm publicly putting it out. You make videos, come on in. With all love. And you know it, that we will have a real talk. You're my elder, I'm gonna respect you, but you have a responsibility to clear up the mess you made, right? And likewise, the mess I made, I have a responsibility to clear it up. And I put myself out there to clean up a lot of the mess I made, because we all made a mess. And now we got to clean it up. And part of it is educating our people with honesty and sincerity. So that's a challenge. So don't take it like it's out there. And I remember it was a time you wouldn't duck no wreck. So come get it. Right now, I'm joking. But all right, aside. So Dawood Adib, I know he's an old head. I don't know if they put him out to pasture in a way they did, but I don't know if they threw him off the minhaj completely. But the way he says it, they give him the blues. He ain't the man no more. I know that for sure, right?
They dimmed the lights on him.
They dim the lights big time, right? And so it'll be a different conversation. So he's out. Abu Muslima, we talk to Abu Muslima all the time. He's Abu Muslima. I don't know what you're saying, but they dim the lights on him first. So he's off the minhaj and the lights dimmed on him. But what I like about Abu Muslima, I vehemently disagree with some of his ideas, but he's a man. I respect that. That brother, and many people don't like him, but he's a man, and I love that.
Yeah, he's a stand-up guy.
And we be going at it. You've been around me and him, we all the time. But I respect his manhood. And I respect he's not gonna be no slave. Even if his ideas are way out there. That's my opinion. He don't agree with me, but his ideas are so out there to me. I think he got his own madhab. He just don't call it a madhab. The madhab of Abi Muslim. Abi Muslima. Madhab Abi Muslima. Whatever it is, I don't know the Qawaid. I don't know all its principles. I don't know the hudud and the limits of it. But it's his own madhab, right? And I've invited him multiple times to the round table, but he debates and argues, but he don't argue, right? Like, I don't do no arguing. Debating's haram, right? But I love him. That's my man's.
Yeah.
But they threw him off the minhaj. He was the first. Even after making a bayan, they still threw him off the minhaj. Abu Usama, they threw him off the minhaj, right? And as you know, I've had discussions with him. See, like this ain't stuff that people don't know. They just think we be on the line and we just bashing people. Nah, we brothers. We have real talks. Like, nah, we could kick it. Let's talk. Abu Salma. I remember he said to me, he said, "Yo, I made a lot of mistakes that I regret." I never forget that because we was at our mix, and he was like, "Yo, man, me and you we don't need to do that. We need to really have a real talk." The same thing I'm saying. He said, "I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of mistakes." We don't want to talk about some of those mistakes, right? But it's all part of it. But when we honest as elders who've been in this thing for 30, 40 years, we should have honest talks that can prevent these next young group of people from falling in the same stuff we fell into. And to be more educated and build, we should do that. Imam Siraj, that's my buddy, my heart, my loved one. They've been disregarded him and threw him off the minhaj. You know what I mean? He never really was on it. And even when he went to Mecca and Medina, they was throwing him off before he even got started. Like, this is real stuff. Anwar and Anis Muhammad, they threw them off the minhaj. And they grew up in Saudi Arabia and was among the first graduates and the specialists. And I remember them back in 85, 86, coming to Sister Claire Muhammad and leading Taraweeh. I remember back in those days. Like, I go way back, right? Yeah. So, and one that, I don't know if you would know him, Imam Faheem, because it might have been before your time. Do you remember Sheikh Khidr Lawrence?
I do.
Remember he was the man?
Yep.
Before all of them.
Yep. Light-skinned brother.
Yeah. From Newark. He was at
he was the Northern State chaplain.
Yeah, but he was at what's that? Bradford Place.
Yeah.
He was down there. And I remember in the early 90s, his tapes was all over the place. He was the man, especially in the Northeast. Whatever happened to him? I remember he was the man.
Yeah.
Right? And for us, you remember, I don't know, because you was in Yardsville, right?
Yeah.
So you wasn't down like Leesburg and Southern State. You never,
No.
But I don't know, maybe, but they came visit. You remember Imam Talib and Amin and them?
Talib Abdin Shakir?
Yeah.
Yes.
So remember, all of them were, whatever happened to all of them? For our community, especially in the system, they was like the big Salafi,
Mm-hmm.
Where all them people go, right? So now you got, like, these were people who were impactful in most of our journeys. I mean, for people in our communities, our journeys in Islam. What happened to all those people, right? Like, that's some stuff to think about. So now all these new guys, right? You forgot there's a 50-year legacy of people that just been wiped out the historic books. He's a deviant. It's over. And then you can go back. I talked to one elder, and this is a whole nother level that go back to the 70s, Ak. And only the elders would know this. When you had in Philly, now I'm getting old myself, so I'm forgetting names. Sister Rabia, what's Abdullah Ali's name? Ali, you remember he used to be on Broad Street? He was running the community. He lives in Saudi Arabia now. I talked to him. I'm just getting old and I'm forgetting. What's his name, Rabia? I know you got to know him because you're from Philly and you in that time. Ali Abdullah, Ali. He lives in Saudi Arabia now. He was originally before Masjid Mujahideen. He was before them. They actually came out of his community. Ali Ahmed. This brother, he was like, and they were connected to Saudi because he was a money dude, getting money and doing stuff. And he was close to my father-in-law, Sheikh Camille Wadood in Newark, right? So there's a lot of back, and that was in the 70s, huh?
Mm.
In the 70s. And they were doing stuff. They had a seat on Rabita in Saudi Arabia. This is a lot of stuff when you unpack it. And then when we're talking about doctrine, many of them been through a lot, right? So there's a lot to unpack, a lot. You know what I mean? When you be honest and like drop all the ego, drop the pain and the hurt. That's why I said the pain of being sincerely mistaken, because there's a pain with that. And some, like if you discuss with them, it hurt. It bring out like, because they went through stuff. And then now you start to realize you don't even have the capacity yourself, because you got a certain age, your intellect, your skill level, your knowledge of Arabic, all these things start like becoming obstacles for you ever getting it right. And sometimes the young people are brutal, the new generation, because they had more access. So their Arabic is better. They brutal, you know what I mean? Your Arabia is whacked. Yeah, man, I didn't have the access you got. But they don't give that. So that's what happened to Dawood Adid. Them young guys come back, graduates, you didn't finish. They could criticize you, make fun, and it's only a little bit in the money market in the Masjid. So get rid of you, get the young buck. That stuff happens. It's real. And you really can't talk because now they know you don't know as much as you was pretending, because you was at a certain level. But them young boys, they surpassed you. They have more access to you. And they know you ain't all you were claiming to be. Right? All of that stuff is significant to future development. Not to put nobody down. It's just like this is what we've been in, right? And how do we overcome it, right? Because now more information is coming, and that's going to put us even further. Like you're reading, and I don't like to advertise certain stuff because it's like, but we can't just be blind followers no more. So we have to read even the stuff we don't like. That's deep. Because we've been victims of blind following so much, we can't afford to do that. As a people, we have to read stuff we don't even like. Right? That's some deep stuff. All right. So this conversation has get kind of personal with me. And I'm like, oh man, I'm still in recovery.
Me too, man. Me too.
Like when I think about it, right? It's like, and they put a key like to slaving us is we don't talk to deviants. And the deviant is who Rabi al-Madkhali, who don't even live in America, don't have nothing to do with us, is the deviant. Because that's like, we don't talk to deviants. We only talk about deviants. We don't talk to them, we just talk about them. Anyone with logic would say that don't make a lot of sense, bro. You don't talk about no one, but you can call someone a deviant. You won't discuss with them. You call them a deviant, off them in hedge, don't listen to them, but you can't discuss with them. But you can discuss about them. Where is guidance in that? Like, that don't even make no sense. But some of us buy that. Like the young buck. He talked all that junk, and his escape hatch was, we don't talk to deviants. Right? Like, that's how you got out of it? We don't talk to deviants. You can talk about deviants. You can criticize them. You can lie on them. But when it comes to answer your stuff, we don't talk to deviants. That is a perfect alibi to just continue blind following and misleading people without ever being challenged. And then play victim when someone pull your card. Like that's like the perfect cloak and dagger stuff. You know what I mean? Like, but no, these are real discussions. And let's take some questions because we're getting late
Yeah.
and we got a bunch of questions.
Uh,
Uh, all right. So let's just hit some of these questions real quick. I'm gonna go back up and put some real quick. If I miss some, Imam, just grab them because there's a lot of stuff go.
yeah.
Um, I don't want to get into too many names. I mean, even though I don't mind, but I think the
Mhm.
stuff that is unnecessary because the point is the point. So to talk about every individual or that's not what we're doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, everybody here like, what about him? What about him? What about him? You just get the point. Everybody's off the minhaj. Don't worry about it. We all got to figure it out. Okay, let's take some of this because so I'm gonna answer that in general. All of us off the minhaj, and we all got to figure it out. We
we
got to
all
come to the table, have a real discussion. We'll iron it all out. So for your answer, everyone is off the minhaj until we find out what the heck the minhaj is in the first place. Right?
until we get clearance.
Yeah, right. All right, so let's take some of these questions. The first one, our brother Hussein. How did you first hear of Dr. York at such a young age, Imam? Were you introduced to it from other Ansars in your city? Oh, you want that story? That's some real tea. But let me tell you. All right, how did I hear about Dr. York? Number one, I didn't know nothing about no Dr. York. It was As-Sayyid Al-Imam Isa Al-Hadi Al-Mahdi. That's what we heard. No Dr. York. Dr. York came when later. For us, he was always there. We just didn't know it. So we didn't know nothing about no Dr. York. Was no such thing as Dr. York. Uh, so how did I come? I grew up in the projects in Atlantic City, the hood, real hood, right? So Joe brothers in the hood, the older teenager guys, I'm talking about 16, 17, 18, because remember, I'm 10 years old, 11 years old. Now that may sound young. In the projects, at 10, 11, you already in the streets doing stuff, right? at 10 or 11, I'm 18 in terms of the stuff we doing in the hood. So you got to understand context. At 10 years old, we selling beat bags to the white people who scared to come in the projects, right? Like we on the end of the outside the project, the white guy who's scared to come in the project, we got fake weeds, bags that the people drop, we fill them up, and we stand outside and sell them to the people, and then run back in the project because they ain't coming. So that's a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old in my neighborhood, right? It's very bad stuff, right? Uh, So the older dudes would go to New York and get their drugs. And when you're in New York, you got Ansars on the train, on 42nd Street, all over New York, So they buying pamphlets and talking about the black man is God. I live right next across the street from the Philadelphia Mafia in Atlantic City. Nicky Scarfo lived right across the street from my projects. That was, the Italian neighborhood in Atlantic City, and they was running the casinos. So we hated white people. We always fighting, and that's a whole nother story. So for us, when the elders would come back with them Ansar books, talking about the black man's God, the white man's the devil, and back to the beginning, and they stole our stuff from Africa, we used that stuff as weapons to go do crime, right? So that was just for the YN back in my day. Ansar books was the perfect solution to all the problems in the early 80s, right? Like, yeah, that's why I knew they was the devil. Now we can do whatever we want, and we got a license. So that's how I got to the stuff, just being in the hood. And I was a rather intelligent young boy. I was good in school. I was good in reading. When I was in the 6th grade, I was reading on a high school's reading level. By the time I got to like 8th, 9th grade, I was reading college level. My school and the teachers I was like probably in the top 3 reading in my whole school, the top 3 readers. So I could read stuff. And they wrote a lot of pamphlets, like hundreds of pamphlets. So I would read that stuff because I could understand. So that's how I got into it. And but I'll tell you how deep it was. I think I was like 13. And those who know me and remember those days, and I think it was 83, maybe 84. It was definitely not after 84. So I was like 14 or 13. I used to go to New York. Now you imagine this little kid going to New York by himself from Atlantic City. In those days, catching the trains, Port Authority was like, that was some sincerity. Like when I think, because I would never let my 13-year-old do no stuff like that, right? But that's the hood. I would go from Atlantic City, catch the bus to Manhattan, figure my way out through Port Authority in the trains, get all the way to Brooklyn to the Ansar community at a little kid. And so I think I was 13, maybe at tops 14, but I think I was like 13. I went to the Ansars, and it wasn't no Ansar community in Atlantic City. It's just the Wafdi Muhammad community at that time, right? That was my masjid. And Masjid Muhammad was like the main masjid in Atlantic City, like 83, 84. So I'm just giving you context. I was Ansar, but that was the only mosque. So we would go there, and my former Imam, Imam Khairi, rahimahullah, rahmatun wasiya, he was the Imam. So this is like 83, 84. I used to go to Brooklyn, and I told Imam Isa in the classes they used to have, I'm like, we need to bring the Ansars to Atlantic City. And people remember this. It was 83 or 84. He sent a whole busload of brothers, like a whole busload, so like 40 brothers with all the books, everything, and we painted Atlantic City. He did that on the request of a 13-year-old kid, 14 tops. Like it was a busload of brothers, all the books, and they just painted Atlantic City with the Ansar stuff. Right? That's how, and I'm talking about, so that's how dedicated we were. And anybody from Atlantic City, remember, I used to be the little kid walking around in a white robe. I was in it. And most of the young guys that are now Muslim, a lot of them was with me, and I was bringing them that Ansar stuff. It's these new guys that don't know, but like back in the day, I was like one of the youngest dudes, and it's probably the only one like that. Young guy in Atlantic City, like doing that type of stuff. Well known in all the projects. Like it's not like somebody don't know me. All of them guys would be honest. These guys, I remember none of them were like that. Not a one. Right? We go way back. So that's my long answer story, and I'm sticking to it. And it's not cap because everybody know you. You can't hide when people know you. Like I'm well known, right, in that area. Yeah, so that was my way. And alhamdulillah, so I went through it. And Imam Isa was the one who sent all those brothers. That's how I knew all of the brothers in New York, all the brothers in Philly. Because I was a young kid. They were fascinated by that. And we had a group of us from my project, and then from another VAC, a lot of them brothers, we were teenagers praying at Nisfu Min Sha'ban, the middle of Sha'ban. We were teenagers in the projects praying 100 rakats in houses. With all our white, doing 100 rakat by ourselves, a bunch of teenagers, 14, 15, 16 years old. Can you imagine it? Like, picture that. A bunch of young kids. Nobody got dads. It's just a bunch of kids in the projects throughout Atlantic City.
In the 80s, that's remarkable.
Yeah, that was us.
Man.
You know, all right, that's nostalgia. We were on misguidance. We were on blast. But you should, maybe, and ain't nobody doing that. Think about getting a bunch of young people doing that today. That'd be like pulling teeth. We had on our garbs. We would fight to go to school in our white garbs. They were crazy in the 80s.
Mm.
All right. That's my nostalgia. But I admit we were misguided and misguiding. And blasphemous. I have no doubt about that. But I wish we had the energy today like we had then. I wish we could sustain that energy with Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. That would be great. But those are the good old days, and they're gone, right? Go ahead, question, Imam Faheem. Oh, that's Habib. Let me answer his question. Habib, I'm gonna leave your question to last because it's the most. It's not it's not really related to what we're talking about. Was Imam Jamil Amin connected to the Salafi movement? You want to answer that? Or you want me to answer that?
As far as I know, not directly connected to it, but he wasn't at odds with it. You know, I remember a personal story actually related to Imam Abu Muslima, and you might remember this one, Imam Amin.
He
So
told us that at dinner, right?
yeah, he told, but I was there in Philly that day.
Oh, okay. Because I
Well,
remember when we had the dinner in
yeah,
Maryland. Was that
we
Maryland we was at? Where was we at? Maryland, right?
yeah we was in Baltimore.
I
Yeah,
remember him telling the story about this
yeah.
in Maryland.
So he had said something about Imam Jamil, something like not popular, and so they matter of fact, what's the name said the story? I think he said on here, Imam Asim Rahimahullah. And so the story was because Imam Abu Muslim used to come to Germantown, I think the first Saturday or one Saturday a month. And so he would do there. And so that's when everybody was flocking to him. But that was also the time where they had a splinter group that was, operating, looking at his faults, like behind the scenes, And so he had said something about Imam Jamil and it reached Imam Asim. And Imam Asim sent word to him, then next time you come to Philly, we're gonna deal with you. Right. And so you know it's in the air, right? And so I remember being over the bridge and the brother was like, yo, come on, man, we gotta go defend the Sunnah. And I was like, what do you mean defend the Sunnah? He said, yo, they trying to attack Imam Abu Muslim. So because he was the man at this time, right? I said, defend the Sunnah. How is that? This man get his knot rocked. You know what I mean? Why we got, you know what I mean? Yeah, he got, you know what I'm saying? That's what he said. We got to go defend the Sunnah. Imam Abu Muslim to these guys was the Sunnah, going forth and not stopping it. And so what happened, and I think he corrected the story or something, but the story that I remember hearing that they was frisking people at the door, and they said that Imam Jamil Al-Amin had made the call, leave him alone. And so then I think Imam Asma was mentioning on the show when he was on about, how the feds was like infiltrating all that kind of stuff. And, but so I don't know him being particularly part of the movement, but at that time, there was still, the caliber Imam Jamil Al-Amin was like the ultimate kind of warrior, man. I mean, been at the fight, even now in his upper age and his health declining, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free him. He was just a different breed, man. He was just a different breed. And actually, I remember we brought him to Camden at Rutgers University to do a talk, and they started trying to ask him about his minhaj, And I remember I had to step in because I was like the moderator, and I had to step in like, don't ask him questions about that. Ask him questions about the topic that he talked about. And so anybody who wasn't with that movement exactly to the T, that they were suspect. So I don't think he was really a part of it.
I would say this, right? The answer is definitely no. He wasn't a Salafi as some people may define it. But yes, he was influenced with some ideas that are shared with the Salafis. And a lot of people are like that. And I'm only answering it like that because over the next couple roundtables, some of the stuff we're going to discuss, you have to get out of names of people and get to ideas and concepts. This is very important. When we mention in names, we're not talking about people really. We're actually talking about concepts. And because people don't know concepts, we identify people so that the concept would come out. Is this clear? I'm telling you, we're never talking about people in terms of like criticizing people. That would be foolish if you really understand what we've been through. To talk about people would be foolish if you understand what we've been through as a people. The only reason we mention people so you can get the point, because the people will kick in your mind. Then when you talk about the idea, you can identify it easily. If we talk about ideas, you're going to get lost because a lot of people don't study. They just follow people. So when you talk about people, because of an idea, eventually you can move from the person to the idea, and that's what we're really talking about. If that makes any sense, if you understand what I'm saying. So we're never talking about people. Once we can get to ideas, and then we just talk about ideas and concepts and beliefs, no matter who had it, then it's easier. So I would say this: many African American movements have been affected by the doctrines of Ibn Taymiyyah and Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab in some way. There's extreme indoctrination. There is moderate indoctrination, and then there is very light indoctrination. All movements that got information from Saudi Arabia have been affected. Everyone who learned from the route of Saudi Arabia has been affected. It's just how much. You might not got pneumonia, but you got a little cold. You sneezing, right? It's levels to it. But anyone who learned from Saudi Arabia has been affected. Saudi Arabia brought all those ideas and revived them in the nation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So everyone's been affected by it in some way, in some form, who learned from that route. And unfortunately, they had our government to help spread their stuff in our communities. So it is a reality, and it's not an attack at all. Is it okay to read books of Ibn al-Qayyim as long as it's not on the subject of Aqidah? If you're asking me that question, I would say no. If you are a learned person, then I won't fear for you what I would fear from an unlearned person trying to read his books. So for a person who has not studied thoroughly under the guidance of a teacher who can point out nuance, I would say no. Because there is the danger of Aqidah inside of things without saying it's Aqidah, right? And if a person is not well studied, they won't recognize that. You know what I mean? So for safety, I would say leave his books alone. If you learn, then by all means, discuss, research, because it's necessary. It's depending what you're doing. But for safety, all of his books, all the books of Ibn Taymiyyah, all the books of Nasruddin al-Albani, all the books of any of them, for the one who hasn't learned, should be absolutely avoided for safety. As for the one who learned and who can identify things and understand them, then there may be some important reasons why you would read their books. And for what it depends what you're doing with them. Even their books in Aqidah. It depends what you're doing. Right? Now, are you learning enough to do it? I don't know. I didn't talk to you. Right? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But that's just a conversation. If we had a conversation, I could tell you if you qualified and learned it enough to take that risk just from talking to you. But that's a conversation. And what are you reading and which books and why? Are they in Arabic? Are they in English? All that is a given, right? Where we at, Imam? Okay. One more question. What is it? Are you catching other questions that I might be missing?
Yeah, they in the chat. I don't know if you. What
What's
is the,
what's go ahead.
what is the best way to warn your friends against the dangers of Wahhabism?
I'll let you go ahead and take that.
Really teaching. Really teaching instruction and knowing the dangers yourself. Many times we don't really know the implications and how deep the Wahhabi rabbit hole runs. We just thinking it's like, okay, some people still think that he was a mujaddid. Some people think it was just like trivial issues. They don't really realize how deep it runs. So to warn any friends against the dangers of Wahhabiyya, you have to know it. You have to research it, not just reading like as far as theological issues and issues of fiqh, but knowing the history of how Saudi Arabia got established, knowing the three Saudi states, knowing the first state, the second state, the third state, knowing how they make takfir of people, unrestrictedly, knowing what scholarship is and how it didn't apply to him, knowing how he left Ahl Sunnah wa Jama'ah, and not following, the method of, Quran, Hadith, Ijma, and Qiyas, knowing that how he took the law into his own hands, which is one of the traits of the Khawarij, knowing how he defied authority, because he didn't have the authority to do the things that he did. So know that history and know it well. And so when you could tell people, and one of the things, I talk about him now, like, what do you know about him? Besides in those romanticized colored books, right? Glossy books. What do you know about him? What do you know about him? And if all you know is that he purified the land from Tawheed, then you have to do some research. So that's my answer.
Uh, for me, I say this. One of the great scholars from the Salaf, his name was Sahal ibn Abdullah at-Tustari, rahimahullah. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was never disobeyed with anything more severe than ignorance. And it was said to him, do you know anything more severe than ignorance? He said, yes, ignorance of ignorance. And why am I mentioning that? Because the best way to warn your friends against the dangers of Wahhabism or Wahhabism is to educate them and get them out of a state of ignorance about their religion. And that takes time. If a person is learned, really learned, it will be less likely that he would fall into obvious deviant movements. They need to have access, exposure, and learning. If all those things come together with ultimately tawfiq from Allah, because Allah guides whom He wills and causes to go astray whom He wills, they're less likely to fall into those things. So I say education, education. But if you're not educated and you don't have access, what can you do? Nothing, right? Can't do anything. Okay. Let me answer Habib. Habib, are you still there? Habib, love fitna. Can't you tell? But this is the Black Imams Roundtable. We don't duck, even if it's gonna be fitna, right? Habib, if you ain't there, I'm skipping this one. Are you there? Or you just come start in trouble and leave? I'm gonna hold this question till he come back and answer.
I think he got a scheduled fight he went to.
Is he there?
I think he gone.
All right, I ain't answering then. Um, we came out of mass community in New Jersey. My children, who are now in their late 30s and 40s, feel it was like a cult experience. Thoughts? Do you know what mass is, Imam Faheem?
No.
Aki, you don't know about mass?
No.
It's the kind of bubble you've been in. Right? It's a Salafi bubble. They deviants. We don't deal with you. The mass uh, is basically an Ikhwani Muslimin uh, ran organization.
Okay, I forget. Oh, Muslim Associate Society.
They on usually college campuses. So
Yeah,
mass,
that's what I was thinking. I couldn't.
like
Yeah.
Krishna, mass,
Yeah. Oh,
all of
yeah.
those, but they're mostly an Arab ran organization, and many of their leaders are from the Ikhwani Muslimin. Uh,
So, is she asking, did that feel like a cult or?
she said it felt like my children were in their late teens feel it was like a cult experience.
Okay.
I don't. It has its own idea and its own leaders and its own everything, so it can have that feeling. Uh, I'm not a great fan of the Ikhwan and Muslimin movement.
No, she said Madrasa to Ahl Sunnah, Imam Abu Muslim's community.
Oh, that's what she mean.
Yeah, that's what she just said.
Oh, she's not talking about mass.
Okay.
Oh, she talking about Abu Muslims. I don't think it was a cult. Abu Muslim don't got no cult.
No, I don't think
I think
so.
it was the Salafi thing at its time. And he got thrown off the minhaj and they moved on to something else. And I don't think it was a cult. No, I would never accuse him of that.
No, I
Even
think
if it felt like that, I don't think he would run no cult.
no. I
No.
think in talking to him, I had a nice candid conversation one time. We were at an event, and he said, he never really wanted to be like they just kind of threw him out there, and because of this, his style of speak, it appeared to be, because he was outspoken, he was upfront, and they exaggerated his level to one that he was never seeking. All he wanted to do was teach people, and he was always on time for our people. So a lot of that was from outside sources, making him more than what he even was trying to be. And he didn't, and he said this by own admission that he didn't really have a finesse to kind of. So if you listen to his old stuff, he was like straightforward. He was straightforward. He's a straight shooter the whole time. And where we come from, we love that kind of tea. People shoot straightforward, no matter who affects it. We drawn to that, and so it was the people that made it seem like a cult, and not him necessarily calling to it, because he was never a fan of like real deep, you know, like Arabic scholarship. He was always like on his own thing, not like a cult, but for his community, he was dedicated. And then people around really, man, because I mean, he had nothing to do with people like talking like him in this monotone kind of sound. People talking about making hijra to each orange. He never called for that, but people, because they were their personalities. And so when you learn how to separate the personalities from the principles, and that's where people get lost, because when the personality and they learn the principle, now it becomes a problem. You know what I'm saying? And so it was more the people, because I used to be like, man, who is this guy? I remember meeting him, and I was like, he was real down to earth. But listen to other people, man, I'm making hijra to East EO out. We're going to EO out, and these were people who had cult mentalities in the regular situation. So
I think I mean, because I talk to Abu Muslim regularly, uh, and I'm not. I mean, I consider him. I put it this way: I like him a lot as a person. I disagree with him totally. And Imam Faheem heard us on the way back from New York knocking each other upside the head. That's just, but we got the same kind of nature in a way, right? He is sincere. I just think he's sincerely mistaken, but I don't doubt his sincerity at all. And I definitely would never accuse him of running a cult. I think that's what he received. He's even in that he got his own independent thinking. That's just him. I'm the same way. right? Like we got the same spirit, just different methodologies, but the spirit is basically the same. And if you hear, I wouldn't call him. No, I don't know how to describe him. I'm still trying to figure that out. Right? I mean that's that because every time I think I got him figured out, he switch on me. So I don't know what to do with that. He's a good dude though. He's a pure-hearted person. May Allah reward him and raise his rank. Uh, he's a good dude. I cannot say anything. I think if uh, yeah. I don't know what to say. No, definitely no cult. Definitely. Kind of extreme, yes. Over the top sometimes, yes. Uh, but I think it all comes from a good place. Uh, yeah, I think it all comes from a good place. I just think, access and exposure. I mean, listen, the guy come to Masjid Muhammad and hang around me. That should tell you something about his spirit. Because y'all listen to me. I'm one of the biggest Wahhabi refuters in the black community. And he can hang out with me and call me and talk to me and go out with me. And so that should tell you something about him, right? That alone should tell you something about his spirit. He's a good dude. Now he probably be like, "Hey man, don't be talking about me. I'm talking about you, what?" Right now, stuff. But you're a good dude, man. So I'm not the one to ask about that in terms of because I don't believe he's running no cult. And I'll give you an example. My my young brother who's works with me regular in the masjid came to me through Abu Muslima. The way Sayyidi Muawiyah got to Masjid Muhammad was through Abu Muslima. He brought him. So that should tell you what kind of person he is. And you see, Muawiyah is a goofy Sufi, right? He went from Salafism to goofy Sufi. Now I'm messing with you, Muawiyah. I'm just having fun. Uh, okay. What else we got? What's that one? Go ahead.
My question is that supposed to say, for example, you live in a city that has these ideas and traits, but there's only two communities that don't have these ideas and traits, and they're trying to convey Al Sunnah. What advice could you give could strengthen them in promoting with it correctly? I would say, man, put your opinions together and put something together where you have a format of teaching. One thing we have to remember is that we talked about countering this stuff of decades. We mentioned like a 50-year history just in our communities, and so it's going to take at least 50 to start countering and start seeing a change around. But put together a program where people are being taught, and you concentrate on your people, because I remember Sheikh Nur Hamim Keller, he said, some people it's written for them to follow that. Some people it's for them. Some people, you know, they have a Bedouin like mentality, like when like Ibn Abdul Wahhab used to go and give dawah. He went to the desert, to the Bedouins. Some people are made for that kind of doctrine. Everybody ain't going to get it. Everybody can't go. So work on your communities. Y'all put something together, cut through all the red tape that will prevent you from working together, and put together a solid teaching curriculum, inshallah.
The people that deny the atrocities of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, are they just misinformed and insincere? I think people just don't know. I don't think that has nothing to do with sincerity. I think they just don't know. And if they do know, they give an interpretation that makes it justified. I don't think it really has nothing to do with sincerity. Sincerity is only known to Allah anyway. How do we know what's in somebody's heart? We may know what you do and we may judge by what you do, but Sincerity is known by Allah. And my teacher used to always say to us, and still says, worry about your business, don't worry about Allah's business. I don't know what's in one's heart. I'm only dealing with what you're doing. I'm dealing with the rules. That's it. As far as what's in your heart, you may, have the best intention in the world, be mistaken, right? In my Ansar days, I wanted to be in the ranks of the Mahdi. I wanted to follow the Messiah. I wanted to be in the 144,000. I wanted to be right. I wasn't trying to be misguided, and that wasn't my thoughts. I thought that was correct. And so did Imam Faheem when he was a big time Wahhabi. But no,
Man, I just wanted to be from the
in
same.
this circle,
Yeah.
right? Just want to do the right thing. Ain't nobody. So I don't. Now I'm not saying people are not insincere, but that's known to Allah.
Yeah.
I think people just don't know. Access, mistaken, misinterpreting, all of that. Sincerity, a person could be sincerely mistaken. And that's what I believe a lot of us have been. That's just my thoughts. But sincerity is known to Allah only.
Yeah. And I think some people will overlook the atrocities because, they might be on the payroll, or they might have the status, there's, even in MIAW's da'wah, there were people who just went along for fear of getting killed. Not that they necessarily believed it, but they just jumped on board. So we had those kind of people too. So, may Allah give us all tawfiq.
So what is the methodology to study scholastically? Is there a process? Yeah, I got an answer for that because I believe this is what we collectively need to do. All right, let's write it down. Y'all ready? Number one, admit that we don't know. That's number one. Get comfortable with saying, I don't know. Get comfortable with that. Can we all put that up? I'll start. That's me. I'm first. I don't know. I'm still in the lengthy process
Of
of
recovery.
learning and researching. That's it. I'm cool with that. Can we put that up if we want to be honest? I don't know. I'm still in the lengthy process of learning and researching. That's reality. Most of us can't admit that. That's painful to say I don't know for us. What you mean I don't know? I know some stuff. Yeah, some stuff, and a lot of other stuff you don't know. Right? Don't know. That's it. So I think if we can get there, that's a step. That's step one to me. The second step is to exhaust the resources of knowledge that you have at your disposal. Whatever's in your area of knowledge, try your best to exhaust that. And be open to the possibility that there's some more information to be added to what you've gathered. And there could be some corrections and some more details. To me, that's step two. And the third step is try to learn Islam both globally and historically in your research. While you're trying to learn and research, make it globally and historically. So you try to capture the whole world and every generation back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think that's a rough process. It's a long, lengthy process. But if you do that, I think the likelihood of being way off is less. I'm not saying you're not going to have errors and mistakes, but if you're able to take all of those things, those 3 steps, the likelihood of you being way off in your ideas is slim. That's and learning with living teachers. Everything you learn, try to learn with a living teacher, right? I think that will help. That's my my brief step to that. And of course, start with what is globally accepted as Sunni Islam. And that is the well-known schools of Aqidah, the Asharis and Maturidis, the 4 madhabs in fiqh, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, and the scholars of spirituality, the Tasawwuf, as a base to start. And then as you expand, you have something to compare with. And ultimately, it's guidance from Allah. If Allah doesn't give you tawfiq, give you success, it is what it is. Imam, you got anything?
Yeah, just quickly, once you realize that, come to terms with you don't know, then develop a zeal to learn. Develop a zeal to learn, and just realize in your journey that, you got to just keep reviewing and be in the process of recovery, especially if you've been exposed to Wahhabi doctrine and things connected to it. Just keep an eye open. Keep one eye open like CVS.
This question is a question that I think is just inflammatory from the person because he don't like somebody made him angry. Habib ain't here to talk for himself, but he's been on this stuff. And I don't know Habib, who he may really be, because but Sheikh Abdullah al-Harari al-Habashi slandered prophets with sin, takfired real Sunnis, made his cult the only saved group. Ahbash are extremists, not true Asharis. All that stuff is claims. And each point needs its details. But it's easy to say something about somebody and not be fair. I think everything you mentioned here, I would reject all of that because all of it is how you see it, not how. And I'm quite sure you yourself have not really examined Sheikh Abdullah al-Habashi from Sheikh Abdullah al-Habashi. I guarantee most of the stuff you're talking about is secondhand reports. So it doesn't really have weight as a criticism, if we be fair. If I ask you, okay, he slandered the prophets. When did he say that? What book? What is slander? Was he the only one who said that? Were there other scholars who had his same opinion? Takfir real Sunni Muslims. What is takfir? Why did he do it? What was the point? Who are the real Sunni Muslims? How do you define a real Sunni Muslim? Made his cult. What is a cult? Why did you call it a cult? Did he say he's the only saved group? Is his cult? You understand what I'm saying? This stuff is nonsense. It's just talk, right? And I'm not saying there's not something that you might want to challenge, but what you're saying, all of that it doesn't have weight. It's not even academic. It's not even researched. It's not thorough. It's just baseless accusations. And then you get to a conclusion. They are extremists, not true Asharis. What is extremist? What is a true Ashari? How is it? All of that stuff got to be weighed out. That's like, you got to be fair. Just because you don't like somebody don't mean you get to say anything you want about them. That's not fair, right? Especially when you're talking about someone who definitely was a scholar with no doubt about it, right? The likes of which the world hasn't seen in our time, if you be fair. So Let's be fair, right? And then if we be fair, we could have that conversation. And I don't mind having a conversation. I'm just saying we got to be fair because that's just slander. that all them statements about someone without no context, that's not fair. So I'm just saying I answered you, but I don't think your statements are fair without details. You with me, Habib? My brother.
I thought his name was Khabib all this time.
No, Habib.
Oh,
That's the Russian way of saying Habib.
oh, okay.
You know Habib, the boxer.
I know. That's what I'm saying. He better be a real fighter, man. Because if we
No,
cross
he's.
paths, man, I'm slap boxing with you,
I
man.
know, but they be wrestling bears, man. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, you better be the real deal. You know what I mean? Because if not, man, I'm slapping you upside your head.
All right, let's close this out. Levon got a question. I got a question. Right, I got a couple questions for him. Levon Brown. Who did I saw him on a podcast with? Oh, Mohammed Mendez, Sheikh Mohammed. I got some questions for you, Levon Brown. Right, let me stop. I don't know if you spoke about this, but that is the very problem. Though the internet helps with the access, most of the bookstores in the American Muslim community has one perspective. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So that's what I'm saying. To be fair, we have to do more research. And that's knowledge, right? We don't have enough experience and access. And many of the people who have the ability, they duck rec in our language. You know, you got this educated class of people who are not that educated to act like, like they really scholars and they not. You know what I'm saying? It's like we got that going on. You know, I have a PhD, so I'm an expert. Who lied to you? Right? I got a PhD, so I'm an expert. An expert in what? In delusion? Stop. Right? That you could tell that's someone who never studied. Anyone who sat with a real scholar will tell you the PhD is junk. You could throw it in the trash can for Islamic knowledge. I know that's harsh, but anyone who studied with real scholars at the feet of scholars, reading books, taking research, the PhD can be thrown in the trash can in terms of Islamic knowledge. Now, they may have other value in the Western society, academia, but in real Islamic studies, that's junk. Now, I done angered the whole PhD crowd. I did it intentionally. It's junk. You can put it in the garbage can. In terms of Islamic knowledge, if you're talking about something else, it has value. But if you're talking about scholarship and real Islamic learning, that stuff is junk. It don't even fit the systems of traditional Islamic learning. When I started learning, there was no such thing as a doctor. You a sheikh or in a field. Now you Dr. Sheikh. That stuff is cap. That's me talking. And I'll take it. The stuff can be thrown in the trash can. Right? For knowledge of the deen. If you talk about something else, some research paper, some, all right, I may give you that. You may be La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. I hate to say it, I said it, but it's junk. And that's why they don't talk to me. Come on, man, stop. Stop. You nowhere near no professional of nothing, an expert in nothing. And they stamped you for their university. Knock it off. But that's harsh. Maybe, see, that's why I told you I'm trying to be nice. And I'm not making claims. That's just not scholarship. And anyone who's been around a scholar know that's not scholarship. Even the one who's trying to sell you that, know that ain't scholarship. All right. That's the way to end with fireworks. Right? So getting the physical book of fiqh or ashari or matters, Yeah, it is. But, inshallah, that'll change. But that's for everything. Books are not available readily for us in the West. Real good material. We getting shortchanged. Uh,
Yeah, that about it, man.
yeah, that's about it. And listen, all my PhD recipients from Western universities, or even University of these schools, y'all know that stuff junk, right? Compared to our traditional studies. And if you study traditionally and you compare it to your seminary studies and all that, that stuff is nonsense. You know it, and we know it too. So that doesn't mean you don't have no value, but don't make claims because those claims are not real, right? Let's stop. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't deny you may be a smart dude. We don't deny you may put in a lot of work. Scholarship, no. And you know it, and I know it too, right? So you in the same position as us, which probably worse because that can lead to delusion. You actually think you arrived. Like when I hear them tell me something, well, this is my field and I'm an expert. And I be listening to them talk about Akida. I'm like, what kind of expert are you? Listen, there's one expert out there, and we're going to talk about that expert, ain't we, Imam?
That's right.
I was listening to him today. He talking about Akida is his field. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? What have you been studying? But that's the delusion that happens studying in these so-called Islamic universities without studying with real scholars, with asanid and chains of narrations and books from cover to cover, without really sitting with the different people you're talking about, then coming in the West, getting in the Western education indoctrination, and then developing your own sense of authority with a bunch of unlearned people. And then the marketing campaign of people who's trying to get their organizations up and they accept that nonsense. All of those things lead to fake scholarship as a combination of stuff. All that stuff together lead to fake scholarship. That doesn't mean you don't intend well. We're talking about the reality. And when we deal with reality, you know what I mean? Come on, man. Be honest. And the worst thing I see is people who actually have some real Islamic studies and sitting with sheikhs and studying, sit there and listen to that stuff and never correct it. It's disgusting. For someone who actually experienced in the tradition, no making claims. I'm saying if you really sat with real scholars, reading real books, line for line, page for page, and sit in their company and be around them, you know this is nonsense. Come on, stop. Stop. Please slam on brakes. Anyone who really did real studies, real Sunni traditional studies with real living scholars, stop. Stop. Immediately slam on brakes. Go straight to jail, no pass go. May Allah help us. We got a lot to overcome.
Amin.
All right, Imam. I went to the store. I guess you can close the store.
Ya alhamdulillah wa shukrullah. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity tonight. We hope that it was a benefit for you all. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from us. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا أتمم لنا نورنا واغفر لنا إنك على كل شيء قدير. سبحان ربك رب العزة أما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.
Fatiha. Assalam.